Hello? Good morning, everybody. If you all will grab your seats, we're about to start the presentation portion of the breakfast. Please go ahead and grab your seats. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Max Shafir, and it is truly an honor to welcome you to the 48th Legislative Breakfast on Mental Health. On Thursday, February 5th, 2026, Governor Stein signed an executive order to improve behavioral health care and public safety in North Carolina. The order directs several cabinet agencies to take action, strengthening how the state's behavioral health and criminal justice systems coordinate and serve the public. For nearly 5 decades, this breakfast has brought together legislators, DHHS leadership, mental health executives, clinicians, consumers, family advocates, and community partners across North Carolina. 48 years of momentum, showing up, collaborating, working towards a stronger, more responsive mental health care system throughout the state. That consistency matters, and it speaks to the dedication of everyone in this room. I want to give an extended and sincere thank you to all of our elected officials who are here with us today. Your presence shows a willingness to engage in difficult but necessary conversations about mental health in a public, collaborative space. We appreciate your leadership and your commitment to this work. A very big thank you to the Friday Center for once again hosting us and providing such an excellent support and hospitality. Your partnership ensures this event runs smoothly and that our attendees feel welcomed and cared for. Events like this are only possible because of the organizations that stand behind the work. Our title sponsor, Innovative Behavioral Health Services. Our platinum sponsor, Morse Clinics. Our gold sponsors, WellCare, Molina Healthcare, UNC School of Social Work, Voices Together, NC Association of Public Community Health Plans, Easter Seals Port Health, Covenant Case Management Services, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of NC. Thank you all for your commitment to expanding mental health services and strengthening care delivery. Let's give our sponsors a big round of applause. Now, this year's theme is When Empowerment Meets Resilience in Trauma-Informed Care. It reflects the shift happening across our field of mental health services. We know trauma takes many forms, from childhood adversity and family stress to community violence, chronic instability, and military-related experiences. But today's conversation is about trauma as a label. It's about healing and strength and recovery. It's about early identification, trauma-informed environments, accessible supports, and coordinated and collaborative care across all systems. The people in this room, the policymakers, the providers, the advocates, the executives, and the individuals with lived experience, they're the ones who make this change possible. This collective is how we move forward. I want to give another thank you to my board of directors for the Legislative Breakfast on Mental Health. It's a big undertaking, and it takes a team to do it. I want to give a special appreciation to Linda Atack and Julia Husk for their steady support in preparing today's program and working closely with our sponsors. Their behind-the-scenes efforts help make this event possible each year. We have a full and impactful program ahead of us. We've got some great speakers lined up for you. We've got some great legislative panels that will answer some difficult questions. I encourage you all to participate fully, to share boldly, and continue to strengthen the partnerships that keep North Carolina moving forward. And now it's my pleasure to introduce someone whose leadership and advocacy have significantly advanced mental health conversations across our state. Our MC for this year, Senator Sidney Batch.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you are doing well. I feel like this is the disadvantage of being a little taller than most. So I'll just talk up. But it's really great to be here with you and and have the honor of emceeing this 48th Legislative Breakfast on Mental Health. I've had the privilege of speaking on panels in years past, so you will be spared from my commentary. And I will be in a different role today, but it's been an honor to be on panels, and this breakfast is always so very impactful and meaningful, especially when the world is getting more difficult, more challenging, not only for our youth, but also just us all navigating it. And so I appreciate being in a space and a community with you all so that we can go ahead and continue to push forward on the mental health needs of this state and the people that we serve. Before we dive in, I want to also, first order of business, is to go ahead and recognize someone who has guided and has been the MC of this event for years, year after year. He's in our audience today and is actually representing one of our gold sponsors, and that, of course, is Senator Mike Whitaker. If you could stand up and be recognized. You will get no hair jokes, because I don't have them. But I bet you he will have plenty of them for you throughout when you see him. And so I also want to go ahead and acknowledge all the elected officials in the room, whether or not you are local, county, state, boards of commissions, General Assembly. If you guys would all stand and be recognized for your service to the constituents of this state. Thank you guys for everything that you do to serve North Carolina and to push us forward, especially in the mental health realm. And finally, I want to give a heartfelt shout out to every single person who is in this room. Elected leaders, public servants, volunteers, essential workers, individuals with lived experience, advocates, and everyone else who cares about this state and about mental health. I also want to give a heartfelt welcome and thank you to all of the first responders and individuals that had to navigate through this last storm, putting our power back on, keeping it on, turning on our water, clearing our roads, and making sure that this state continues to function. We have been able to take care of our neighbors. We've been able to look in after one another. If any of you have children at home and had to suffer through the last 2 weeks like me, you're here, and we're all getting a break from them. I left mine sleeping this morning. So I do want to say thank you, and to all of the mental health providers. I just want to say deeply my deep heartfelt gratitude. I think we should all pass the hat from my own therapist, who on Monday navigated my session through the rage baiting of my teenagers and PTSD from COVID and having to be with them for the last 2 weeks. I certainly will tell you, you guys need to have a higher reimbursement rate, and I am here for that. So, to each and every single one of you, I just want to say thank you for what you do and what you do for the state. So I'll keep us on task and on time, and want to go ahead and turn to introducing Dr. Sangvi. We have a full and fast-paced program for you today, and so we're going to move quickly. If you need to go to the bathroom, please do. You don't have to ask for a pass, but we are going to keep this moving so that we can get you out of here, because we understand that you could be anywhere on a Saturday, and you've chosen to spend your morning with us. You'll find full details actually in the program in itself with regards to bios, and so I will not be reading the full bios of all of our esteemed speakers today, but you can find that information not only on our website, and then you can also find our sponsors. So we're going to start this morning off with our first keynote speaker, and that's Dr. Sangvi. He is the North Carolina Secretary of Health and Human Services Secretary, and he will be sharing an important update with regards to the state of mental health in North Carolina. And y'all, he's been apparently fighting so hard for us. He's actually in a brace. So, before stepping into his current role, Dr. Sangvi served as the president of Duke Regional Hospital and also led the North Carolina Medical Society. We're grateful to have his insight and leadership with us this morning, especially given the challenges that our state is facing with a rapidly growing population and an increasing need for our citizens regarding mental health access, especially for our youth. And so without further ado, please welcome Dr. Sangvi.
Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here. I'm reminded that when I had the privilege of taking on this role, one of my first speaking opportunities was in this exact forum about a year ago. And it's been a heck of a year, to put it lightly. And among the things that I've been incredibly appreciative of has been the remarkable staff that we have at DHHS. And so if there are any DHHS individuals in the room, could you please stand up? And I'd like to take an opportunity to recognize you. I know we have some of you in here, and you might be shy to stand up. There we go. Fantastic. And you know, it's remarkable because this is the team, and they represent the team that ensure that people have access to health care, that have access to food, and I found incredibly remarkable, creative ways to ensure that 11 million people continue to get the programs and services that they need. I'm also reminded of how fortunate that I am. So I am in a brace. I had shoulder surgery. It was elective surgery. I guess there's no surgeries that are elective, but about 8 days ago, and I think to myself how fortunate I am to have insurance, to have access. The surgery center was only 15 minutes away from my home. The surgeon is a good friend. I had great opportunity to have PT and all the other stuff, but perhaps the thing that I'm most happy about is you can't see it from where you're at, but my brace has a deeply embroidered Duke logo on it, and nothing makes me happier, particularly on a day like today, to be in Tar Heel country with this right here. Yeah. So to all the Duke fans out there, we will celebrate. To the UNC fans, better luck next time. No. All right. Aaron is here with me. Aaron has already left, in fact. He's like, I got to take you out the door. All right, so I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the accomplishments that we've had at DHHS, and I'm going to go through it quickly because we have an annual report that's been recently released that really covers some of these. And the success of DHHS is really the success of the many people that the Senator had recognized earlier. Lawmakers, advocates, patients, and others who have really pushed for us to really think about what do we need to do to tackle the behavioral health and mental health challenges in North Carolina. So before I talk about some of our areas of focus and how we're trying to manage that, I want you to do a couple of things for me. Tell us if we're focusing on the right stuff. Let us know what we're getting right, what we're not getting right, and continue to interact with us because we need to be responsive to the needs of the state. We can be thought leaders, we can be implementers, but we are not the individuals who are in the towns and cities that cover the massive geography that is North Carolina and 11 million people who live here. So take a look at that annual report that came out from our Division of Mental Health. It's going to talk a lot about the things that we've been focusing on. I know Director Crosby will be part of the panel here later today. She's in the back of the room there. So we'll make sure that she has an opportunity to talk about that in more detail. But before I start talking about what we're doing, I think it's important to reframe the state of affairs of what we're dealing with here. So I think North Carolina did something that we all who have been in the mental health and behavioral health space, which is a really bold move, and I know for those of you who treat patients, one of the most difficult challenges is to admit that you have a problem. And North Carolina as a state did that. And North Carolina did it in a way that they put money behind willing to be able to do that. So we are still fortunate to recognize that about a year and 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, many of the lawmakers who are here from the General Assembly appropriated nearly $800 million to behavioral health services. And it's one thing that's allowed us to say, okay, we have a challenge, what are we going to do? But this is the state of affairs. We know that there's greater awareness and reduced stigma. That's fantastic. And for those of you who've been in the behavioral health treatment space for long enough, you can see the difference. When I was in residency training, people would say things like, I have depression. I mean, because it was almost like something you didn't want to admit to. And now we are willing for people to say, I have to go see my therapist. I need to be able to take time off from work. That's huge. That's great. So we have this greater awareness and a reduction in stigma. But there are other things that are happening. We know that there's a lot of chronic stress out there, and it has this cumulative biological effect, this wear and tear. Sometimes it's called allostatic load. We know there's a lot out there, and that's contributing to the challenge as well. a lot of societal uncertainty. Somewhere around 80% of studies link uncertainty to higher stress, anxiety, and depression. And I don't want to continue to point to this, but we know that we're still evolving as a society to really understand what's the full impact of the digital age, everything from social media and now more around AI and the impacts that that has. So we're seeing these forces that are saying we're either uncovering or in some cases causing a need for more behavioral health and mental health services. And like any type of opportunity to think about mind and body, it's only natural we think about what's the role of prevention in what we're doing here. And again, the awareness alone isn't enough. I mentioned that there's this widespread uncertainty, this ongoing stress, and there are some preventive measures that are out there. We know that you can reduce that allostatic load that I mentioned by simply having green space. More time outdoors actually has shown to lower inflammation and stress. And higher screen time and sleep problems leads to higher allostatic load. And so these things that we're focusing on that are asking, should we have screen time? What's the best opportunity? How do we ensure the opportunity for children in particular to have outdoor time? How do we have green spaces? There is a biological need for all that stuff. And I hope at the end today I can at least convince you that we have to start thinking about there's an economic development opportunity in that as well. A couple more pieces of data. These are the adults ages 18 to 25 who are most likely to have a mental illness compared to other age groups. You can see the increase there. And by the way, we'll make the slides available. So if anyone needs, one of the best compliments when you're giving a presentation is when people want to take photos of your slides. So you guys, so I love all the cameras that are up. I know that they're pointed there and not at me, but I'll accept that. But we'll make the slides available for sure. But this is important because this is the pivotal age where you're getting that ongoing, the end portion, if you will, of brain development, neuroplasticity, and so forth. So those are the type of areas. So when we see the need that we're seeing in this population, it compels us to say, what are we going to do? And then finally, just another pointing towards social media, this idea of who's using it and how often they're using it. And you can see the extent to which social media has become a big part of what's happening. And you see some of the other data that compels us to kind of understand where do we understand the role of social media fits and not. You'll see here, and these are North Carolina data, over 80% of youth use it several times a day. 50% will look at social media on an hourly basis. And so I also want to ask ourselves, are there things we can capture out of that? I mean, we all know that it's hard to, the negative messages or the wrong messages seem to overpower the positive messages, but there may be something to capture there. 40% report persistent sadness. You see the data here about depressive episodes, but you also see that 50% report a difficulty in accessing mental health services. And I found this statistic particularly interesting. And in a class of 30, some have shown that up to 15 or half have witnessed bullying. And it's just not North Carolina. You see it across the entire country. Here, you'll see the rest of the data. I won't read it all, other than to say that what's happening in North Carolina is probably symptomatic of what's happening throughout the rest of our country. So access is one of the things that we really need to focus on. And I know we talk about access in a traditional sense. This is an opportunity of where the digital age may actually help us with some of our access challenges. This is North Carolina. Regardless of how you want to look at it and what the colors show, 97% of our count, 97 out of the 100 counties are a shortage area, whether you look at it by density, whether you look at it by geography. And so you'll see us trying to do things around workforce, but the pace at which you can replace the workforce, for lack of a better term, is nowhere as fast as the pace of need. So we're going to have to think about how to do things differently in order to meet this need. So here's what we've been focusing on at HHS for the last year, and then I'll drill it down a little bit to how it applies to the behavioral health and mental health space. Increasing access to health care. This is a common thing you hear, but we're also looking at this issue of affordability. It's now gotten to a point where it's just not can I access, but can I afford? Insurance is incredibly important, which is why we've been focusing on the importance of Medicaid to ensure that we can continue to have a robust Medicaid program. We're also focusing on investing in whole person and community health by prioritizing things like mental health. a focus on our most vulnerable citizens, which includes children. I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing there. And then finally, looking back at that initial slide I showed, or early slide around this whole idea of workforce, how do we make sure that we're continuing to develop a healthy workforce in North Carolina? Looking at it more specifically from a mental health perspective, our goal is to make mental health services more available when and where people need them. No idea is too small, no idea is too big. We've got to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of people where they're at. So we want to build these strong systems that support people, particularly in crisis, that moment of crisis. Again, if you're on the treatment side, you know that can be the most pivotal moment, because oftentimes a moment of crisis is also a cry for help, and if you don't capture that moment, you may not be able to capture that individual when they really need treatment. We're also going to be focusing more on data and outcomes, and I'm excited to report that several of the things that you see in our annual report on mental health services are actually available through a dashboard. And a lot of the outcomes right now are process, or a lot of the metrics are process metrics, how many have, and I think that's okay, because we know the need is so good, and so by measuring just simply outreach and how many lives you've touched, that's an important thing. But we're going to have to start thinking about what's the evidence that some of the things that we're doing are actually having an impact, because we want to make sure that we invest every dollar in the place where we know it's going to have maximum impact. And I keep going to this issue of workforce. We got to also not only make sure that we have enough people, but we're actually supporting the workforce. And as I think about individuals who I've worked with who have been behavioral health professionals in one way or another, and as several of them are going to semi-retirement and retirement, many are actually factoring in the fact that they are fatigued as well. And so this is the healer, heal thyself type of opportunity as well. It's just not enough that we need more. We want to make sure that they have the right work-life balance and actually the joy in work that keeps them compelled to do the things that they do. So access to care. This is where I'm going to go through a bunch of things that we're doing. Again, these are available in the annual report. I hope I can convince you that we've started to think about who we reach, how we reach, where we reach, and the vehicle through which we reach individuals. So this is expanding access to crisis care. We've opened new behavioral health urgent care centers, 13 of them throughout the state. We've started to expand these MORS clinics, this idea of mobile outreach response. We now have these in 16 counties, 140 new beds in community crisis centers, and expanding our peer respite centers and growing them about 100%. So these are all opportunities to figure out where can we reach individuals where they're at. And you know what? When you cite statistics like this, it's important to recognize the enormity of work that needs to go in to actually go and do these things. And so you can think of it, some of these are very startup in terms of mentality, some of these are very expansion-oriented, but regardless of how you do it, it takes a lot of time, effort, and there is opportunity costs associated with that. I mentioned earlier crisis, that moment of crisis, 988 suicide prevention line and the warm line are important elements of what we focus on. If you take a look at the numbers here, almost 120,000 individuals in 2025 reached the warm line. And take a look at the 988 number. Almost 200,000, 160,000 individuals called the 988 line last year. So the data are out there. So we don't need to talk about it from an academic perspective or anything else like that. The data are out there to show that the need is pretty great. These are data, by the way, that you can follow on the dashboard once that's up and running, and so you can see what we've seen here. I think what's really impressive is the 3-second time period that our 988 line can actually reach out to individuals. So kudos to the team that have continued to build that, continue to support that despite some of the challenges that we've had to move that forward. There are specific populations, as we know, that are particularly at risk. We know that Black youth in particular are at risk for suicide. Has to do with a number of factors, notwithstanding the issues related to access. Where can I get care? Am I going to get good care? What can I do when I do need access? And so we've focused on making sure that specific populations, and I'll talk about others, have found ways to make sure that we're not trying a one-size-fits-all, because we know that's not going to work when we're looking at the enormity of the challenge that we have in the state. We're also reaching out in schools. So this is a program that we've had. I think we're now in a little bit over 4 counties, but this is an opportunity to think about the opportunity for us to kind of think about how we move through the challenges that we have in state government with respect to, or not in state government, but just reaching out to people at the state level on the type of services that they might need. This is a digital platform that allows individuals children to reach behavioral health services and to be able to reach them in a way that gets them at a point where they really need it the most. And so we want to make sure that they're able to get those services at a time when they are able to access them. I'll tell you about this point real quick because I know my time is almost up. Most of this digital outreach is actually happening at the home level. So these are kids who can access virtual care services in the digital state or in a virtual platform through the home, anchored through the school system. So I think it's a great opportunity to kind of think about how do you get all parties involved. All right, I am seeing that my time is up, so I'm going to crank through a couple other slides here real quick. So that's what happens when you make too many Duke UNC jokes. You use up all your time so a lot of work we're doing in the substance abuse space, making sure we have the mobile access elements to do that. You heard earlier from Max's comments around the work that we're doing with the executive order and heavy focus on the justice-involved space. So please take a look at that report and see the work that we're doing there and how important that is. The capacity restoration, our ability to reach out to individuals who are coming in and out of the justice center and justice system to find out ways to reach out to them earlier and using any available means to make sure that they get early access and early treatment. So these RISE centers are opportunities to do that. I'm going to end here on talk a little bit about this because I know you're going to have more conversation about it later today. This idea around trauma-informed care. It really gets to what I talked earlier about the enormity of the need and how we have to make sure that we're able to actually get to the people at the right place at the right time. So unfortunately, I won't be able to stay the entire time to hear the panel, but I believe that that's going to be an important part of the kind of work that we're trying to do. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to end without mentioning the important work that we're doing for veterans. I know my colleague, Secretary Millett, is here. And there she is, hey Jocelyn. But the important work that we're doing for our men and women who have served or who continue to wear the uniform. All right, finally, this is our goal. Everything I talked about makes absolute sense because it's the right thing to do from a medical perspective, from a clinical perspective, and from the individual perspective. But we also know that when you have individuals whose brain health is optimized, you actually get economic advantage out of that as well, at the individual level and at the societal level. So we're starting to think about what it means to kind of actually invest in this idea called brain capital. It's really the combination of brain health and brain skills as the way to really think about economic growth. It takes into consideration things like the mental status of individuals or the mental health needs, the neurological needs, substance abuse, all the stuff that we talked about, but it's about cognition and all the digital skills and everything else I mentioned as well. So I apologize, I had to crank through that real quickly. Our slides are going to be available. I'll end by saying we can only do this work when we get the feedback that you all provide to us. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to learning more about the discussion that you have. And I hope you have a great conference, and I hope you all watch the game and whatever team you're rooting for wins. Thanks, everyone.
And the team you're rooting for is UNC. Thank you so very much, Dr. Zangvi. I really appreciate the presentation and also just all of the work that you've done in the first year. I don't know if you wish that you swiped left more often in your life with regards to some options of jobs, but I'm happy that you didn't and that you were staying because at the end of the day, we certainly are tasking the legislature has tasked the Department of Health and Human Services with a lot of responsibility and work, and hopefully we'll deliver some resources to you all soon to help with that. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for everybody who works at the Department of Health and Human Services. You guys have a very, very difficult job, and we thank you for staying in it and continuing to do the work that you are to not only help people with mental health needs, but everything that you guys do in your roles. So at this time, I'd like to actually invite Representative Marcia Morey to the stage to join me. So I had the honor of receiving, of course, the Representative Paul Lukey Award last year. And that was a very meaningful moment for me that I will cherish and carry with me because it's not only a sign of the personal work that I've done within my career, both in my legal and also in my legislative capacity, but it's also the work that we do within communities. This is an award that is given to people who have done so much to dedicate their lives and in their profession to making sure that we are doing what's best for our communities. And in particular, Representative Marcia Murray, of course, reflects so many of the things that this award does. So Representative Paul Luecke had a wonderful history, as many of you guys know, with regards to moving our state forward with regards to our mental health system and building that. And this award, of course, is named after him. And right now, it's a legacy that many of us in this legislature who have been legislative champions and have received these awards, like Representative Verla Insco, my good friend Senator Jim Bergen, who's here, and Senator Mike Woodard, who also received it, and also Representative Donnie Lambeth, just to name a few. And now we have the great honor of adding Representative Murray to that list. For those of you who don't know about her career, what I would tell you is that she represents currently House District 30 in Durham and has served in the North Carolina General Assembly since 2017. Before joining the legislature, she was actually a judge and spent decades serving the people of Durham as a district court judge. And during that career and that time in her life, she actually spent 6 years of that as the chief district court judge from 2011 to 2017 in Durham. She is a tireless advocate for juvenile justice and has been a driving force behind Durham's misdemeanor diversion program, which connects young people with rehabilitation and community-based services and addresses underlying issues like substance use and mental health challenges, offering support and accountability instead of incarceration. And so, without further ado, I would love to present Representative Murray with the Paul Luecke Legislative Champion on Mental Health Award. Picture. Well, you want? Oh, people want pictures. Oh, this.
It'll break.
You want me to hold it like you?
Thank you. I will be very brief. This means a lot, and especially the name Paul Luecke. I am now in the seat he held from Durham. He was a real hero and an inspiration to us. And so I thank him and then all the prior recipients. It's an honor to also accept this award. But I do need to start out with a confession. Since I've been at the General Assembly the last 9 years, I have developed a very severe case of oppositional defiance disorder. Hey, I'm a Democrat, you know. Ask my Republican colleagues. They know it's incurable, but they are putting it up with me. But I do want to just briefly thank those who taught me, and I'm starting out with all the kids in juvenile court. Those children who came into court labeled delinquent because of a crime are mostly youth who are in poverty, who are victims of trauma or abuse or neglect. They did not ask to be born in those circumstances. And at age 12, 13, 14, they had no control over their lives. Yet we treated them as if they were fully functioning adults to find them responsible for their acts, even though their brains would not be fully developed for another decade. We have to keep that in mind. And what I found, though, with the vast majority of these kids, that they were very responsive to services and treatment because they found an adult who cared. They found an adult who listened. They were finally somebody. And their resilience was amazing. And you all helped provide that. And I thank you. They are much more than carrying a stigma of delinquency or a mental illness. They have a future. I'd also thank court counselors, social workers, therapists, foster parents, group home providers, juvenile justice professionals, DHHS workers, you all work so tirelessly to give these kids a chance at a good future and hope. And you all deserve so much better. And we must, in this state, appropriately, finally, compensate you for the work you do for raising healthy young children, adults for North Carolina. We have to invest in you because you invest in our future. I thank Governor Stein for the extraordinary executive order that he signed on Thursday. It is a beginning, and I only hope my colleagues in the General Assembly, we will stand behind it, and we will invest. We will get out of being 38th in the country in access to mental health services because we have to pay our workers and we have to retain our workers. They deserve so much better. And I think Co-Chair Reeder, I'm on the IVC Public Safety Committee. He's doing an excellent job looking into the problems when people come in for involuntary commitments and we can't find beds and they wind up in EDs for days and weeks and weeks. We have to change that system, and I think we'll come up with great recommendations. So I thank you for your leadership. More than anything these days, these days are about compassion and they're about caring, and that's why each one of you is sitting in these chairs. That's what this legislative breakfast is about, and I am just so proud and humbled to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Morey. One of the things she didn't say is that I was a freshman legislator, and we went to battle in one of our judiciary committees to try and raise the age because we are charging kids at 6 years old, y'all, in our juvenile justice system. Six. We were just trying to crazily raise the age to 10. But she has really just been an amazing and tireless advocate for our youth and for the juvenile justice system. And so she is very well deserving of that award. And so now I would like to turn to a new award that we actually have this year. So this year, in celebration of innovation and forward-thinking approaches, we're proud to introduce a new recognition award that honors bold ideas and impactful programs in the mental health space. The inaugural Forging New Paths in Mental Health Award recognizes innovative, forward-thinking programs that are creating new models of care and expanding access to mental health services across North Carolina. The School of Social Work at UNC North Carolina at Chapel Hill, of which I am a proud alumna, has demonstrated national leadership in research, workforce development, and community-based practice to help shape the future of trauma-informed and evidence-based mental health care. We are proud to recognize Dean Ramona Denby-Benson and Dr. Sarah Reeves for their leadership and continued commitment to forging new pathways in mental health. Please join me on the stage. This is like giant. Oh, over here.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Senator Batch. We really appreciate that. Before we begin, I just want to say one thing so that I don't forget it. It's a great day to be a Tar Heel. We appreciate this acknowledgement so much. And Sarah and I, my colleague here, we accept this on behalf of literally hundreds of social work students, social work faculty, and practitioners, many who are in this audience today, who are doing this important work every day. We consider it a privilege to do this work and to do it from our value perspective as social workers, where we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all. We count it a privilege to work in community, to be with community, and to situate our community first and foremost with these services. We started this journey about 2.5 years ago to really focus on developing the social work workforce, and we are so excited to be able to share with you today an update on that work. Before we do that, my colleague, Dr. Sarah Reeves, is going to give that update. But before we do that, I would like to give a sincere expression of our gratitude to key partners who saw our vision, believed in our vision. I think it was about 2.5 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, where we reached out to Kelly Crosby and we said, we have this idea. We think that we need more social workers and fewer social problems, and that our North Carolina neighbors and family and friends deserve better. We have such a shortage, as you all know, of mental health professionals in every category, and as the Secretary indicated, in the majority of our counties. And we just began to brainstorm this vision that we had, that we wanted better for our state, and immediately Kelly embraced the idea and began to work with us, and not only gave her time and talent, but showed us compassionate leadership and teamed with us in a genuine way to be able to develop this. We see that this is all of our roles. It's not just a public responsibility, so we quickly began to reach out to our public partners. And we're happy to say that Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina quickly came to the table as well and said, we believe in this. We are especially concerned about children's mental health, and we will enter this journey with you all. So we thank them, our critical partners, our inaugural partners on this effort that Sarah is going to share with you. Before I turn the mic over to Sarah, I want to say to our colleagues, elected officials, please check your inbox, check your spam box, because you have an invitation from our Chancellor, Lee Roberts, to attend our launch event at Carolina Inn on March 2nd, where we will talk about this initiative and join with all of our partners who are supporting this. And then finally, I'm going to transition over, but I'm going to ask my colleagues if they will stand for a moment. I'm going to call their names. They don't know this, so they're going to be mad at me afterwards. But my colleague Sarah is already here, but if Lisa Zerton would stand, if Paul Lanier would stand, Kathy Colville would stand, Candace Farrer would stand, Bill Schaller, Joy Noel Baumgartner, and I hope I have not missed any of my other colleagues too. The reason I'm asking them to stand, we had this idea a few years back. I was a relatively newcomer to North Carolina. I said, you all, we as the flagship, we have a responsibility to our community. Mental health is the lifeline of what we do as social workers. And I said, what can we do in a real meaningful way? And we don't intend just to develop another paper or a publication, but what can we do that is genuinely going to change lives and improve systems and help our community? The individuals that you see standing immediately came together in partnership with the community and conceptualized an idea of building up our workforce. Develop a white paper. I won't tell you the page length on the white paper. Kelly might tell you later because she asked that the number be cut down. But they came together and literally from years of doing this work, using their capital and their network, but more than that, their genuine care and concern for residents across the state, and actually gave birth to this idea. We created a coalition. All 25 universities in North Carolina that produce social workers are in this coalition. No rivalries, it's all cooperation, working together, and it's these individuals that you see standing that gave birth to this initial idea. Thank you all so much.
So when we talk about public service, we often focus on systems, policies, and programs. But when we talk about public service social work, we're talking about people. Public service social workers meet individuals and families at some of the most difficult moments in their lives, during crisis, transition, and times of uncertainty. They work with children who navigate traumatic experiences, families facing housing instability and food insecurity, individuals who are seeking recovery, and communities impacted by inequality. In those moments, it's social workers that show up and do some really powerful things. They listen, they remind people that they matter, they do the work. Social workers just don't help people access services, they help people find stability, dignity, and hope within some very complex systems. We understand that this work is demanding and often it goes under-recognized, yet social workers continue to serve with compassion, resilience, and commitment. Because of our public serving social workers, I, along with so many people sitting in this audience, can say someone believed in me, someone advocated for me, someone protected me, someone supported me at a time when I needed it the most. The road to what we now refer to as our North Carolina Public Service Leadership Program, it did begin about 3 years ago at this mental health breakfast. We had an impromptu conversation in one of the back lobbies where we sat and we, amongst our representatives and our state leaders, and we asked two very direct social work questions. What are the needs of our state system, and how can we, the universities, help? Like the communities they serve, our North Carolina Public Service social work workforce also has some very complex needs. Staffing shortages remain high, wages are low and uneven, workloads are becoming increasingly complex, and resource allocation is inequitable. And we have a workforce that is highly compassion fatigued and experiencing burnout. We also talk to our students across all of our schools, and quickly learned that these needs were not lost on them either. Requirements of the curriculum were very demanding, their practicum hours are not paid, and their family and personal obligations are extremely complex. So, we are social workers. We've identified the need, and now we're going to do something about it. We convened the largest CFT meeting that you could imagine in this world. We brought all 25 programs of social work across the state of North Carolina, not just our UNC system schools, but our private institutions as well. And we brought everybody to the table and we said, tell us about your program, tell us about your communities, and tell us about how we can come together and address these very real needs. And so this new entity that we call the Social Work Coalition on North Carolina Workforce Development meets quarterly to address these very concerns, and from that have birthed our North Carolina Public Service Leadership Program. So yes, after a white paper, an abbreviated white paper, and several meetings and funding presentations, we are pleased to announce that we'll be launching the North Carolina Public Service Leadership Program on March 2nd. With the support of DHHS and our Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation of North Carolina, this program and all of our collaborating partners across North Carolina are working to address the needs of our social work students and our practitioners, those who are committed to public service work and working with our most vulnerable populations. The 5 critical areas that we'll be addressing in this program include child and family well-being, mental and behavioral health and substance use treatment services, adult and aging populations, individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and services to our justice-involved communities. Through this initiative, we're working to fuel this pipeline. And in fueling that pipeline, that's not just career fairs and job fairs with other universities. That's going all the way down to our high school students and say, hey, here is a profession and here are the opportunities. Where do you see yourself fitting into this picture? We're also working to enhance our current curricular programs across the system. 25 programs, they're all accredited by CSWE. When we take that information and we translate that to public service, we recognize that there are gaps. There are gaps in how we address complex needs. There are gaps in how we address co-occurring needs. And so this program is going to work across the state to understand how we fill those gaps and support our students while they're going through the program. And last but not least, the part that speaks directly to my heart is our existing workforce. They are struggling, they are challenged, but they are yet committed, and they want to stay. So how do we address the professional well-being of our practitioners? How do we engage them in the content knowledge that's needed to address the needs that are growing and changing across the state? And how do we support them in remaining whole, productive, and effective in North Carolina communities? North Carolina needs more social workers. North Carolina needs to retain their social workers. And the work and impact that this powerful workforce does in our communities needs to be seen by all of us. So if you're interested in learning more about our program, you're interested in supporting this work, visit our table, grab some of our flyers, tell a friend, but recognize this work is going to take a village, and we have plenty of open seats at our table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually not surprised that her white paper is long because her mother was my professor. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your remarks and the work that you guys are doing. We are now going to turn our attention to the panels, which I enjoy so much. The theme for today's event is When Empowerment Meets Resilience and Trauma-Informed Care. We're going to explore that through two different pillars. Pillar 1 is trauma-informed care for children and adolescents, and Pillar 2 is trauma-informed care for adults and veterans. Each pillar will include presentations from experts in the field, followed by a panel discussion and question and answer session, but with that my legislative colleagues will join the stage for, and of course it will be moderated by the wonderful and brilliant Rose Hoban, founder of North Carolina Health News. It's appropriate after Dr. Singhbai talked about all of the experiences that children and adults actually are dealing with regarding trauma, and that it continues to increase time and time again. It should not surprise any of us that if we do not address that, it affects every single aspect of our lives. People with trauma who are not getting treated are walking around bleeding on people who did not cut them. Okay. And the reality is that individuals who are not, we should not ever and blame people for their trauma, but we should give them the resources because it's their responsibility to heal from it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Trying to make sure that those individuals who are looking for help have access, have resources, and can heal from the trauma that they never asked for. So at this time, I'd like to invite the participants for Pillar 1 to please join me on the stage using the staircase to my right. As they make their way up, I want to note that the biographical details for all of our panelists were shared in with registered attendees and are also available on the event website. To keep things moving this morning, I'm going to introduce right, left, center, if you were a track star, hurdle on the stage. To go ahead and actually keep things moving, I'll just introduce them by their name and affiliation with a little bit of background. And then we will, of course, I'll turn it over to Ms. Hoban for the panel. So our first presenter is Dr. Carrie Brown, Chief Medical Officer for North Carolina's 13 state-operated health care facilities. God bless her. She also provides psychiatric leadership across the Department of Health and Human Services. And I would like to have, oh, she's right. Right. Dr. Brown, go ahead and join me. Thank you so much. So good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, we don't know our right from our left, but that's okay. And then second of all, I feel like I can't start without acknowledging some colors. So here's my thing. I was trained both at Duke and UNC. So I'm half light blue, half dark blue, which is so not allowed in North Carolina, but I think it just means that I was destined to become a psychiatrist. So in all seriousness, I'm very appreciative of the invitation to be here this morning on behalf of the department to talk some about our efforts to transform behavioral health for children and families in North Carolina. Oops, there we go. And hopefully many of you know that the General Assembly very generously allocated $80 million to children and family well-being in the last biennial budget. And we developed a vision for these dollars. Because if you really want to be good stewards of dollars, you have to have a vision for them. And our vision is that we would have child-centered, trauma-informed, high-quality services that would enable all youth to remain in home or in a home-like setting. And there are many different things that we have, goals that we have for these dollars. They're a little bit ambitious, but if you don't dream big, then you won't get the results you want. So we really want fewer emergency department visits for behavioral health. We want fewer children that are sleeping in emergency departments or DSS offices. We want to have more children in foster care, those that have behavioral health needs, to be living in a home-like setting. And then for those that do require out-of-home placement, we want to keep that out-of-home placement as short as possible, and we want to decrease readmissions to those out-of-home placements. So with these bold goals, we have embarked on multiple different initiatives. One of the things that I think is so, I want to say fun, but that may not be the right word, but what has been so fun about working with these dollars the General Assembly so generously gave us is that it has truly been a cross-divisional work. I don't know if you all know, but North Carolina DHHS is a gigantic agency. We have 33 different divisions, and we have 4 divisions that came together and really, in a true collaborative effort, figured out how do we meet that vision. So I'm going to divide up the different initiatives by those divisions. So first, in the division of child and family well-being, there are going to be 4 different categories of how the investments have been allocated. So first is supports for families and family-type settings. And there's been a particular focus on increasing intensive alternative family treatment and therapeutic foster care beds, as well as developing family peer support, which is a huge resource. We know that peer support in general is so important to recovery, and family peer support is really critical for our youth. As well as families need respite, right? Everybody needs a break. That's part of how we take care of ourselves. And all of these services, I'm happy to say, are already available in the community. So these dollars have already been put to good use. We also want to focus on behavioral health in schools because we need to meet kids where they are. They spend an incredible amount of time at school, and that's where we need to be able to meet them there. And so that includes things like funding our school-based health centers and making sure that our school-based health centers are working with our local health departments. And then expanding access to behavioral health services in school using telehealth. And all of these services are already available in our communities now. We also need to make sure that children have access to evidence-based treatment. And you'll hear a little bit later from a colleague, the Child Treatment Program at the Center for Child and Family Health, but we wanted to invest in this program because this is where the evidence base is. And if we want to make sure that youth that have experienced trauma get the best possible care, we need to make sure that the care that they get will get us the outcomes that we want. We also wanted to expand Child First program because we want to try to build that resilience in the home and decrease the likelihood that any youth has to enter foster care in the first place. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are investing and implementing these dollars in a way that is of maximum impact. And so that's what we will also want to create, a Center for Excellence that looks at the implementation science of all of these dollars. And that is expected to launch shortly. The others are already available and investments have been completed. In our Division of Social Services, we have 4 areas of investment. First is, and these are in no particular order, by the way, but first that I'd like to highlight is our Emergency Placement Fund. And this is in all 100 counties, which is really important because there are so few services that we have in all 100 counties. And this is for DSS offices to be able to quickly resolve placement challenges in emergencies so that children don't end up sleeping in DSS offices or inappropriately boarding in emergency departments. We also needed to develop professional foster parenting across all 7 regions of DSS. Again, these are services that already are available in the community. And then we want to use existing, and this is the next thing that's coming, is using existing DSS licensed facilities to be able to give care to youth with complex needs. And then we have to stabilize the residential settings that we have now so that we don't have any youth at risk of losing their housing or treatment. Okay, I see I'm almost out of time, so let me speed up here. So Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services has really been focused on our residential service array, particularly our psychiatric residential treatment facilities. We've really we started with environment of care because all kids need a trauma-informed environment in order to heal. And we are now working on creating specialized PRTF units for youth with our most complex needs. And then finally, we worked with our DHSR colleagues to hire additional staff so that we could expedite licensing of mental health residential facilities for youth because we know that there is such a need now. And then finally, I just wanted to show you that of the $80 million you can see here, over 85% of those dollars have already been spent, or they are obligated or contracted. And so we've really pushed to make these dollars get out there and be of good use to the community.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Our next presenter is Dr. Robert Murphy, the Executive Director for the Center for Children and Family Health, a collaboration among 3 universities and community partners focused on advancing best practices in the prevention and treatment of child maltreatment and childhood traumatic stress. Dr. Murphy, please join us on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I realize there's a lot of words you had to pack in a really short time. I've been sitting thinking, this is the thing that makes me most nervous, being able to do this. So I'd like to take a few moments to essentially focus on the idea that for children affected by trauma, we actually know what works. And we can help professionals know how to do what works, and thereby more kids and families have healthy lives in North Carolina. So I direct the Center for Child and Family Health, which focuses on prevention, intervention, and best practices related to child traumatic stress. Where I'll be focusing more is the North Carolina Child Treatment Program, which since 2013 has benefited from a legislative allocation to disseminate best practices for child trauma around the state. And essentially, as we have a better workforce, as many people have said, children and families' lives are better. So, as I said, the North Carolina Child Treatment Program is focused on bringing evidence-based treatments to our broad mental health workforce. So, since 2013, about 3,000 children are receiving evidence-based treatments because of this work. And over those years, just during the time therapists are in training, almost 8,000 children have been treated with an evidence-based treatment. We have, 13 plus models, some of that, thankfully, due to Medicaid expansion dollars, which has allowed us to further expand our work. And we maintain a public roster of clinicians who've been trained to a very high level of proficiency so that anyone, anywhere in North Carolina can go into this database, find therapists trained in a particular approach, and where they're practicing, in what counties. So we started quite a long time ago with trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. I could not even count the number of studies that support its effectiveness. So this shows 792 children who were treated through our North Carolina Child Treatment Program. The important thing to really look at here is the slope of the line, and that line going across at 35. So on the left, you see their PTSD symptoms when they started treatment. At the right, you see their symptomatology when they finished treatment. That line across we call the clinical cutoff. It essentially means on that measure, if your score is below that, you don't have PTSD anymore. So again, what works? Another model we use is child-parent psychotherapy. This is for much younger kids. This is a smaller group, 54 kids, but the same story. Fairly high PTSD before treatment and subclinical PTSD at the conclusion of treatment. This is also a model that we've been working with the Safe Babies Court to implement, as well as Child First. So I think, which I guess speaks to the importance of working with lots of committed folks. A couple examples, because of the expansion dollars, we've been able to go a bit beyond the clinician treating the child to encompass the agency. This is the Pathways model, working in many counties around the state to help those agencies sustain their changes in practice. Also, a model that focuses on secondary traumatic stress, therapist burnout. We've heard a lot about the strains on the mental health workforce, so this is another way to strengthen that. Another thing is, it's important to remember that we're really focusing, and this program focuses on treating PTSD, child PTSD. So these are, as you know, kids and families who are already struggling with a range of symptoms, a range of difficulties, but we also know we can avert some of that. So we can also really focus on a continuum that really can prevent so many kids and families from having these difficulties. From primary prevention, there's a model called Family Connects, very low dosage nurse home visits. We have a couple randomized trials. Better parenting, parents are less anxious and depressed, therefore benefiting kids. Medical costs are lower. Child abuse reports are lower. So what can we do? Well, there are many things we can do. But I'd like to focus, or at least mention, 3 of them. One is, I think, as some of the speakers today have pointed out, North Carolina has made tremendous strides in terms of the quality of care that children and families receive, and the greater access. The short version of this map is the darker colored counties have more evidence-based treatment capacity. So we need to continue this work because we know it makes children and families' lives better. I think people have also mentioned that in terms of workforce skill and expertise, that we need to help make it more of a viable career for therapists. You know, we can teach them to do outstanding work, but through a combination of financial challenges, stress in their jobs, it's very hard to afford to be a therapist for kids and families. So we need to keep thinking about those rates. And finally, it's important to just go back to that idea of we have a continuum. We have interventions that are proven scientifically to work, from very, very brief interventions when children are born to home-based interventions for younger children, younger families, and of course to the evidence-based treatments we're focusing on here, and then of course to more intensive levels of service. So Yes. I mean, plenty of work to be done, but I think this is really an optimistic story for North Carolina because of this kind of progress and people around the state who are simply brilliant and people out here who know how to make kids and families' lives better. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And next, I'm honored to introduce our lived experience speaker for this panel, Dakota West. Ms. West brings both professional and lived experience to today's conversation. A former Child Protective Services social worker, she is now serves as a respite foster care placement resource, supporting children and families navigating trauma, instability, and complex mental health needs. Please join us. Thank you.
Today, I stand in front of you as a seasoned child welfare social worker, a respite caregiver to an at-risk infant, and as someone who has experienced the system firsthand. When I was 16, my mother, a single parent, was incarcerated. The reality of being a teenager entering into foster care is that there is not an abundance of safe and loving foster homes as there are with infants that are praying for your arrival. The reality is there are group homes, residential facilities resembling adult prisons, or the hallways of the local emergency room. We have children in North Carolina who are living in office buildings. We have toddlers being rocked to sleep in a cubicle. Not only is this inappropriate and traumatic for all of our children involved, it is also extremely expensive for the North Carolina taxpayers. What would it look like instead if we invested some of that money that we are spending on the hospital visits to put kids with grandma? Why can we not give that same money to a relative to support more kids in kinship placements and to prevent the amount of trauma that we know is coming? The following are statistics about children who age out of foster care found from the National Foster Youth Institute, and we have children that are aging out every day. About 25% will not get a high school diploma or GED. Less than 3% will earn a college degree in their life. 20% will be instantly homeless when they turn 18. 70% of girls aging out will be pregnant by the age of 21. 50%, 1 in 2, will develop a substance use dependency. 50%. Now, as an adult working on a serious injury and sexual abuse CPS unit, I see more trauma in a day than I can describe. I know that not all parents are safe and that we will always need the option for out-of-home placements. When that conversation happens, the difference between a child going to foster care or not is a parent having one person that they can call on who's willing and able to care for their children in a crisis. One person. If you have someone to call, you'll get a safety plan. If you don't, you will get a year or more of court dates, probably several years, and one potential outcome is the termination of your parental rights. When this occurs, it's not just the parents' rights that are terminated. The child's legal connection to their entire family tree is instantly severed. Grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins, you're no longer legally related. How traumatic is that? Losing your family in a courtroom in one day. When or if a child is adopted, there is a new birth certificate that is created. It is adopter-centered, not child-centered, and it is inhumane for us to intentionally erase a child's history. A successful headline is one that says that the system is failing. But the truth is the system has failed long before the call to CPS has been made. The system is failing when a parent working a full-time minimum wage job cannot afford to rent a studio apartment to house their children. The system is failing when daycare costs more than your mortgage. The system is failing when there are not enough mental health and substance use services to go around. The system is failing when people are dropping their children off to CPS because they cannot access the mental health services their children need. The system is failing when we have people among us who do not have one person that they can call for help. The system is failing when instead of giving a child a winter coat, we are calling CPS. Unfortunately, even after years of doing this work, sometimes I feel like I have more questions than answers. Why are we not recognizing the need to support our social workers who are responsible for all of these children? We put policy after policy into place with more and more expectations. Where are the laws requiring reasonable caseloads or safe working conditions for our social workers? I personally have worked 36 hours straight. I have had a firearm pointed at me during a home visit on 2 occasions, and I have had my life threatened by a child holding a knife who was having a mental health crisis. I have been on the phone recently with a coworker who was barricaded inside of a client's home until the police came. We are in homes with nothing but a notebook or a computer. We are not allowed to carry personal protection devices, including pepper spray. The mental health crisis in our state makes my job objectively more dangerous, just like it makes the communities we serve more dangerous. It is no secret that child welfare is chronically understaffed. It was 5 years ago, it is today. We cannot keep positions filled with these conditions. High turnover rates add another layer of trauma to the children that we serve. In the 5 years that I have been in investigations, we have taken many positive steps. We just switched to the PathNC mentioned earlier to give us a statewide database. We have taken a much stronger stance on what constitutes as child abuse. For example, a couple years ago, we were writing safety plans that said, do not leave marks or bruises on your child for more than 24 hours, insinuating that 23 hours was okay. We need to continue to move in a direction that says child abuse does not have a place here. Our families, our children, and their future children deserve more. Traumatized children become traumatized adults who become traumatized parents. That trauma continues to be passed down until a very intentional action is taken to break that cycle. Stopping the cycle of generational CPS involvement happens by ensuring everyone has access to the mental health and substance use services that they need to empower them to be the best people and parents that they can be. I am honored to do this work professionally and at home. One of the things that brings the most joy to my life is being part of the Village by being an open home with the nonprofit Safe Families for Children. I am honored to sit in my living room to rock someone else's child to sleep, to comfort them through their first teeth, and to watch them take their first steps. I am honored to partner with their parents to keep their children out of foster care. What I am asking for today is for everyone who hears this message to reflect on what they can do to start repairing the system one family at a time. What policies can you enact that don't just sound good in theory, but in practice will change the reality of keeping more families together and improving childhood outcomes? Where can you donate your influence, time, or resources to help? What role in the community or in mentorship can you take to be someone's phone call? Every single person can do something, but everyone in this room could change everything one family at a time. In closing, it all comes back to resources. Contributing to my own success was free lunch, food stamps, Medicaid, low-income housing. Because of the Pell Grant, I was able to get a higher education. Because of that higher education, I have been able to break the cycle of poverty. Because therapy has been accessible to me throughout my life, I have been able to break the cycle of trauma in my family. That is what I want for every one of the families that we serve. Thank you.
Ms. West, I'll just take a personal moment just to say thank you for your remarks. I've been a child welfare attorney for 20 years and have navigated families through the worst time in their lives. I won't try and get choked up about what you said, but thank you, because we need more of you. And if you'd like to join us at the General Assembly and run for office, I'd really appreciate it. I don't know where you live, but you can come join us. To my colleagues, see, I can cry. Okay. I'm not known for being emotional, y'all. Okay, so I would now like us to move to, of course, our panel discussion and question and answers. That will actually be moderated by Rose Hoban, the founder of North Carolina Health News. Rose will guide the conversation with our presenters and members of the General Assembly who are joining us on this panel, and in particular, my wonderful colleagues, Representative Alan Boyncey, Representative Tim Reeder, Representative Marcia Mori, and Representative Chesser. What I will also just tell you is that while you hear a lot about the General Assembly and the fighting and the infighting, et cetera, the colleagues that are here today truly believe and care about mental health. This is a bipartisan issue, and we put our differences aside to make sure that families in North Carolina are better served. And so we don't get a whole lot of things right down there, but we certainly are trying to do our best to get this right. And so without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Ms. Hoban.
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure how we can follow up from Dakota. You have big shoes to fill. But I'm going to start with what I've got are questions that have been submitted when folks were doing their registrations to come here. And I've done some, you all got some questions ahead of time, but I've done some tweaking on them as I've been sitting here and adding things from the presentation. So you're hearing the same things that I've been hearing. You know, there's been, and one of the things that was talked about by multiple people is that there's been $80 million set aside to improve behavioral health treatment and emergency placements for children. Dr. Brown gave us a clear idea of what's being used for. That was one of the questions. So first I'm going to ask, do we know if there's any evidence that these investments are starting to reduce the ED, times, the DSS office boarding, and improved placement stability? Do we know at all? Actually, and I'll... Dr. Brown looks like she's ready to go. So
I think, I don't know. I have a loud voice anyway, so I think this will work. So one of the things that we do know is that the number of kids in emergency departments has decreased from the height in the pandemic. However, it's hard to make the causal association. It's really too early to say that that has anything to do with the 80 million. I will say that since we started our rapid response team, which is a department level cross-divisional group that works with the LME MCOs and now our new child and family specialty plan to look for placements for kids with really complex needs, we have seen a decrease in the number of kids that are in DSS offices. So the data is suggestive that we're going in the right direction, but I'd really like a little more time to be able to see that we can make any kind of causal relationship. And the other thing that we did, though, which I'll give a shout out to my colleague Hanalea Huberman, who made sure that when we were designing what to do with this 80 million, that we were going to study the 80 million. So so that is in process now. So through a partnership with Dr. Lanier at the UNC School of Social Work, we are actually going to be measuring outcomes from all of the dollars that will be spent. So right now we're just getting baseline data. So but we will have data for you.
And as you know, data can tend to move the argument at the legislature. Representative Chesser.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off what she said. Right now we're way early in the process to actually say what's moving the needle. But what we do know, we have reasons to be optimistic because we are seeing the needle moving in the right direction. I just had a quarterly meeting with DHHS as a follow-up for the Fostering Care and NC Act, just as far as implementation, how that's going. And at the time of that meeting, there were 0 kids that were sleeping in offices, DSS offices across the state at that time, 0. It has been years since we have had that number.
That's great. So, I mean, for the lawmakers now, to think about the lawmakers on the stage, I think this is a question that's top of mind for many. We're going to have a challenging budget year, at least this year, and maybe going forward, especially with the predicted cuts to Medicaid. So, I guess the question is there more funding to come? And what kind of evidence do lawmakers need to help them make future financial commitments?
The joke was that there's no senators up here, so we can just blame the Senate.
Oh, they'll be up next time. Don't worry. I'll hold their feet to the fire too. Don't worry.
So, before you jump in there, I just got to say, blue is nice, but purple down east at ECU. Yes, there you go. So, the secretary started it off. Yeah, exactly. I think that it's a great question because, as Dr. Brown said, we need to study the interventions that we do to make sure that the money that we're spending is being used effectively. One of the things that I've come to realize in the General Assembly is that we are good at sending money out. We're not so good sometimes to making sure that it gets where it needs to be. We're not sure that it gets where it's supposed to be. Amen. Pass the plate. So I think that's a challenge across state government, not just in mental health, because if we aren't using money effectively in one area, pick whichever one it is, then that means we're not using it on programs and services that are effective. And so going back to your comment, I want to make sure that the money that we're spending are on evidence-based programs. And you mentioned 13 evidence-based programs, so my first question was, well, if there's 13, if 5 of them are really good, but the other ones aren't so good, even if they're evidence-based, we ought to be investing more heavily in the ones that are the best. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's what we need to do in a time that money is going to be tight. Mm-hmm. And we have huge needs across the state, and there's a limited pot of money for that.
And you're still practicing in the ED, right? Correct?
I was there day before yesterday.
So, I mean, just, we know that anecdote's not data, but any evidence that you're seeing?
So I think the first time I came to this, we had a 10-year-old who has been in our emergency department for 6 months. So the longest one, when I was in the children's ED last weekend, has only been there 4 weeks. So in only 4 weeks, right? We've normalized deviance, and what I know is that every day that a child is in our emergency department, no matter how good we're trying to be, it is just additional traumas. And so we try our best, but that's what I know is that we're continuing that trauma. So I don't know.
Representative Maury, it looked like you grabbed a microphone.
I look like I'm oppositional defiant still. Yeah. I mean, we can't keep cutting taxes and have no revenue to fund what we need to be funding. I encourage everyone to read Governor Stein's executive order. There's a lot of facts in it. I mean, 38th in the nation in access to behavioral mental health, 38th towards the bottom of North Carolina, 40% vacancy rates in our juvenile justice, our correctional system. Everyone goes to Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, because we're not paying. I mean, we do need to use our money effectively. We need to fund so we don't have these dismal percentages. We can do so much better. We keep saying teacher pay, but if we don't do it also for mental health services, we've only got half the problem.
From where lawmakers, what I hear lawmakers saying, and from where we sit, in terms of reporting on it, like we need that data, right? We need that data to show that the money being spent is effective. And actually, that was a question that I created. When I've seen so often at the legislature that we're going to, you think about cutting mental health beds and we're going to put it into community services, and that you're going to find savings here and then apply it elsewhere, but those savings created don't often get applied elsewhere. Like, is there a way that lawmakers, or what way can lawmakers create a mechanism to actually, so okay, here's the quantification for these savings. This is where we're going to put it. Like, has anyone ever talked about that? Like, when you're doing these sort of budgetary decisions? I mean, you guys, you're the ones who are writing the budgets.
I'll take a crack at that. So I'll be honest with y'all, I'm not in the room to make those calls, but that makes sense. It makes sense to be intentional and be strategic with money that we are designating, doing our best to make sure that if it's not being used effectively the way we say it should be, that we do everything within our power to make sure that it does in the end. And so I just want to say those are great points. We should do that, and I hope we do that.
What about the people who are in the room? Sorry to put you on the spot, Dr. Reeder, but I'm going to put you on the spot.
I'm going to move to the front of the chair. We have to thread, walk a razor's edge when we do
Could you
these.
hold your mic a little
We
closer?
have to walk a razor's edge when we do these things. The money is finite. How much can we afford to pay in taxes? That's a difficult nut to crack, because we're bleeding our citizens dry to provide services. We were talking about this on property taxes. I was on State Lines yesterday. So, shameless plug. Go watch it. It's fun, energetic. But the reason that we can't rush to judgment on the $80 million that you were mentioning earlier is because we need to make sure we're getting value for the placement. There's an opportunity here for the state to come alongside the private sector, and those of you who provide these services, God bless you. There's an opportunity for us to come alongside of you. We want to. Those of us that are on this panel and in this room want to come alongside of you. We have to make sure we're doing it in a right way and not making the cure worse than the diagnosis. And so that's what we're doing. Him and I haven't been there that long. We're both going into our 4th year in the building. Okay? Look at the body of work that we've done. We're an ally. We're not an enemy. We're trying to find the best way to do this and to make sure that it's practical and it's effective in the process.
And I guess it is complicated, and mental health in healthcare is really important. But if we next week are in a group of teachers, they're going to say we need more. If a group of people who are doing infrastructure and sewer and water, there are significant needs across the state, and what we really try to do is balance those demands. And it's real easy to say, well, just get more money. Well, we haven't been there that long, and maybe Senator Batch knows, if there's a money tree down at the General Assembly, we haven't found it yet. And so we are really trying to make difficult decisions, balancing a lot of different things. And where I live, because I'm on healthcare, because I see the patients that I take care of are the ones who suffer from mental illness and substance abuse and all of that. Those are my patients. So I see that, and I can advocate for that. But in the same room, there's a lot of people advocating for a lot of other different things. And so for you all as advocates, and if you're not advocates, you need to be, hearing those stories and hearing those voices to help us understand and see. The personal stories are really important.
Actually, you just queued up my next question, which is what evidence do lawmakers need to help them make these further financial commitments, and what can the folks in this room do to effectively advocate for that support? So stories, what else?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind, I think, is data, especially at the local level, where DSS, at the county level, they're the ones that ultimately have to implement, and they are on the grounds. I think it's important for us to make sure that we are providing the support to get data, illustrating the impact of things like the emergency placement funds. So I'll say that data, and then also the work that's been done, through the child treatment program to make sure that we are instructing, training as much as possible folks in how to respond to, childhood trauma, child-based trauma, adverse childhood experiences. We need to be intentional about making sure that we are that is permeating not just every state agency, but also making sure that our providers, have the same access to that training. I know that also there is a task force put together, I think, through the support of the Governor's Crime Commission. It's called I'm going to get this wrong, the Justice Informs ACE Court Task Force. And I know, too, that, the children that get caught up in the justice system, there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that all the players that are involved, the defense attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges, that they are all being trained in how to respond to these adverse childhood events that many of our children that get caught up in the justice system are exposed to.
I would say from an advocacy standpoint, if I could give any piece of advice, it's come and tell your story. Every one of us is personally connected. My wife and I, we do foster care for a personal reason. We had a child loss at one point in our life, and so that made us realize that we had room in our heart, room in our home, room in our vehicle. Not so much room in the budget, but we made that work anyway, to bring additional kids in and show that love and just put it back into the community. But whether it's IDD or addiction services, everybody on this panel is personally connected. Several members in the General Assembly are personally connected to that. Come and tell your story. But I'll tell you this, when you come to tell your story, come to make an ally of who you're speaking to. Okay? You need friends if you're going to move things forward. The adversarial nature in politics nowadays, that's what stands out, is when someone comes in and they're trying to build a coalition and trying to build allies. We've got enemies everywhere. We don't even have to try. So let's work together on this.
That's a great piece of advice. So many of these questions, they come down to money. So I'm kind of be a little bit of a broken record. But for example, just this morning at breakfast, I was sitting next to someone who was talking about someone in her family needing a direct service provider, and that it was like a revolving door because there was the pay is not good enough. There are better opportunities for people. What can the legislature do to help alleviate this shortage? I mean, there's money, right? But are there licensure issues? Like, are there any other ways that folks have come to you to talk about ways that would help alleviate the direct service provider shortage? Anyone?
I don't want to dominate. So we've heard a lot about workforce, and it's across every healthcare profession, doctor, nurse, care partner. It just exists. And so one of the challenges that we think about when we're talking about workforce in the state government, there's probably 14 different programs across 3 different agencies that are focused on workforce. And going back to that one question, which of those are good? Which ones work better? And how do we help make that more efficient? And so we're never going to have enough money to satisfy all the needs. So one of the things that we need to make sure is being intentional about the ones that we do support and making sure that we have value from them. Mm-hmm. And so there's and I think in our individual programs, I teach a lot of quality improvement. And what I know is that you can make efficiencies for workforce. If we can reduce administrative burden on our healthcare workers by 10%, not hard to do in quality improvement. If you've got a 10-person shop and you reduce it by 10%, the administrative burden, you've just got a whole FTE without training, without hiring, without spending any money. So we need to be intentional about our self-imposed things. I work in a hospital. We are great at adding additional baloney on our workforce that isn't patient-directed, doesn't help us take care of patients. So we do that from the state. We put all sorts of burden on agencies. Internally, we do it. The federal government, they're great at doing that. So we have to be more intentional about how we do the work that we do to reduce the inefficiencies.
Any other thoughts or?
Trying to improve licensure, people coming in from out of state having better reciprocity, faster reciprocity, so they can be able to practice. I think that might help. And I was talking to someone who had an LPN, but they had a prior marijuana conviction 10 years ago, and they were foreclosed from working at all in healthcare. So, we can examine some of those things, barriers to open it up to help people.
Right, right. Anyway, is there
I'll just also add to, I know in the education context, we have talked a lot about pipeline and being intentional about, whether it's creating programs, at the high school level, community college level. So I think the same thing needs to be applied, in the context of the work that our social workers do, the work that our mental health counselors do, is to make sure that the General Assembly is doing everything we can to support a pipeline exposure of our youth and young people to these professions where you are helping people in one of the most gratifying but also rewarding ways that you can. Meeting people where they're at. I think we would do well to, fund, invest in programs that expose more of our young people to these professions that they can do a lot of good in.
So, Dr. Reeder, you'll have a couple kids shadowing you for the next few weeks, right? So we just got, after years of trying, we just got the Children and Family Specialty Plan up and running. It's been going for 2 months, so I'm sure that the data is, unless you know something that we don't know, do we have any early data? When are we going to get it?
So what I can say is that the department painstakingly monitored all kinds of things before launch. So for example, network adequacy, hiring of care managers, training of care managers. And all of those we're still in the operational measure front. We are looking at kids in the ED and kids in DSS offices for the Child and Family Specialty Plan. It's way too early for them to have had a chance to make significant progress. But we're looking at, have they made outreach to, does every single member have a care manager? Have they made the initial outreach? Have the high-risk members gotten their initial outreach? And so we're still in that operational measure phase, but I can assure you that there's a long list of at least 10 different things that the plan is held accountable to the department. And if they don't meet those measures, then they actually get liquidated damages. So we will have a lot more, hopefully, a lot more clinical outcomes, because they're also part of the whole department's quality plan for all of managed care. So there should be more that we're able to see, a year from now. Right now, we're just focused on the operational pieces.
Is there going to be some kind of dashboard that folks can look at, or what kind of reporting? Like how frequently are lawmakers going to be able to access that kind of information? How often do they want it? Right.
Yeah, there will be, so North Carolina Medicaid puts out a quality report every single year that has a whole list of clinical outcome measures for the entire population, and the CFSP will be included in that as well. That's a good place to look.
I mean, it's the program's just starting, but I'm guessing, I feel like Senator Batch should be up here for this question, but, I'm sure there are some legislative tweaks that folks can imagine making to this program. Like, has anyone thought about that, or are we just also all kind of like wiping our brow and going, phew, finally got it done? What are people thinking about? I mean, I would guess that.
I think it's really too soon to tell.
Yeah.
I mean, we launched on January 1st,
Right.
December 1st, and then we had a snowmageddon, and so I think it's really too soon. But I hope what we'll do is, as we have some experience looking at the LMEs and the PHPs that we're paying for now, we still, in those entities who've been around, we still, to my satisfaction, don't have a good measure of what success looks like for them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, for me, understanding it, and we've had a lot of conversations with the LMEs and the PHPs about how do we measure success. And if all that we do is look at how little you spend or how much you spend or how much, that is way too crude. And we need to be digging in and understanding from a clinical outcomes how and which ones are performing well and what are the things in there that are meaningful.
So I think on that one thing, it's okay sometimes to just pump the brakes, right? If you look at what we've done over the last 2 years, roughly, it's some of the most broad and expansive reforms in this area that have happened in the state, really ever. And so we've added funding, we've changed regulation, we've changed implementation. So the only way this works is if we have broad buy-in and acceptance of the new policies and the new regulations. If we go in and immediately start tampering with it, you're going to get fatigue right off the bat.
Right.
Nobody's going to buy in. They're going to reject it at the ground level, and then they're going to be coming to us to change more and change more and change more. We know, Senator Batch and I have already met, we know there are little tweaks that need to be made right now that we can make pretty easily without ruffling too many feathers, I think. But the wholesale changes that some people are asking for already because they just simply don't like it, we've got to pump the brakes. We've got to let this implement a little bit more and get some buy-in so that we're not turning the whole cart upside down unnecessarily.
Well, to speak as, having done this now for 15 years in this particular event, to speak for folks who are here, I know folks have heard a lot of promises, right? And they're impatient. You've been in the legislature for 4 years. Some of these folks have been in the trenches for decades. So, you'll keep hearing that, I'm sure, because there are a lot of folks who have been agitating for these kinds of things for a long time. There was talk about, we have 4 more minutes?
No.
Oh.
That's why I moonwalked myself out and you didn't see that.
Gotcha. Okay, so we are running long, so we're probably going to be here a little bit after 1, but want to thank all of our panelists. Thanks to the folks who are doing the work. Dakota, thank you so much. Thank you to our lawmakers. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for all the spirited and thoughtful debate during that session. If you guys would go ahead and move off the stage, and while you are moving off, if all of the individuals for Pillar 2 will move on the stage, however you would like to join it. All right, and we're going to jump right into our second panel to keep you guys on time. You gold star. I said gold star. If you can hear me once, clap. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you're a legislature, I love you, but let's get going, and please take your conversation elsewhere. I hope that what you learned from that last session was that there's actually a lot of work in a bipartisan fashion being done in this space in child welfare. And then for those of you who, of course, I'm going to modify the lyrics of Jay-Z, but what I took away from that is we got 99 problems and money are all of them. All right, so at this time, I'd like to turn to the next portion of our program, which will focus on trauma-informed care for adults and veterans, an area of growing need and importance across our state. Our first presenter is Secretary Jocelyn Millett, who leads the North Carolina Department of Military and Veteran Affairs. She is a proud 10-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force, and Secretary Millett brings both personal and professional insight to this work. And since we are aptly in February, which for some of you, I will educate you that it is Black History Month. I want to, of course, just note that she is actually living history right now because she's the first Black woman to serve as the Secretary of the North Carolina DMVA. Under her leadership, the department serves not only veterans and their families, but also active duty service members and their loved ones, working to ensure access to the care, resources, and support they've earned. And so, Secretary Millett, please join us at the podium.
All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Senator Batch, for that warm introduction. I also want to thank Max and the entire team of organizers for this legislative breakfast and for creating space for this critical conversation. To all of our elected officials, mental health providers, veterans, first responders, and community leaders, thank you all for your commitment to improving mental health care in North Carolina. Before I get into my remarks, I do just want to note this beautiful program. As I was looking at everyone's names and the letters behind the respective names, I noticed that the letters after my name are DMVA, which I'm sure are referring to the department that I have the honor of leading, the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. But I actually have a JD. I got a Juris Doctor from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Law. You know, as Representative Reeder said, Secretary Sangvi, my wonderful colleague in the cabinet, started all of this, and Tar Heels don't start stuff, but we finish it. All right, so I want to share something personal. I come from a family of service. I'm a third-generation veteran, but my family has a combined service history of 198 years to this great nation. My grandfather is a Vietnam veteran and Purple Heart recipient who served in the United States Army for 26 years before retiring as a first sergeant. My father served as an officer in the Air Force for 30 years and retired as a colonel. And I served for 10 years in the Air Force after graduating from the United States Air Force Academy, thanks to my congressional nomination from North Carolina Congresswoman Eva Clayton. I plan to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and father and serve for 20 plus years, but my military career ended when I was medically retired due to a diagnosis of a sleep disorder. I have narcolepsy, and that diagnosis changed my life. It was unexpected, and it is what some people refer to as an invisible illness, meaning I don't walk into a room and people see that I have narcolepsy. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because I usually walk into a room with a lot of energy and joy, and when people find out that I have narcolepsy, they're like, I'm sorry, you have what? Like, how does this make sense? But my point is, as veterans, we pivot, we adapt, we find new ways to serve. And today, as your DMVA secretary and as a disabled veteran living with an invisible illness, I'm honored to continue serving by advocating for those who have served. I often tell people this is my favorite job I've ever had, the best job I've ever had, because it allows me to pair my zealous advocacy skills that I have honed as a trial attorney with the passion that I have for serving those who have served. So I do want to shout out to all the senators who are here, especially Senators Batch, Bergen, Grafstein, Jones, and Meyer, who are all here, and to all of your Senate colleagues for unanimously confirming me last summer. So for veterans, trauma may not be a single event. Often, it is cumulative. It's years of exposure to danger, loss, and moral injury. These experiences leave lasting imprints on the nervous system and mental health. And the numbers are sobering. veterans are nearly twice as likely to die by suicide compared to civilians, and they face elevated risk of PTSD, depression, and burnout. And these are not just statistics. They represent lives, families, and communities impacted by invisible wounds. But despite these realities, many struggle to access care, to feel understood or seen, or to be vulnerable enough to speak up. Stigma and cultural expectations of toughness often discourage seeking help. Time constraints and systemic gaps in trauma-informed services compound the problem. You see, too often, those who serve others feel they must suffer in silence. Too often, media narratives reduce veterans to a headline or imply that military service is linked to violence. And when that happens, it distracts from the real issues and challenges that demand our collective attention. Mental health care, housing, employment, and transition support. But I have 3 pieces of good news for you this morning. None of them are related to money, unfortunately. But one piece of good news is that all of you are here, and this gives me so much hope in knowing that such a large group of people who care so much are here to work together collaboratively to seek some solutions. The second piece of good news is that, for those of you who don't know it, my boss, our governor, is very competitive in a great way for our state. He wants to know what other states are doing that we are not so that we can improve. And as Representative Maury said, she's absolutely right. This executive order that he signed on Thursday is just the beginning. And the third piece of good news is that North Carolina is building bridges. My department is working very closely with Secretary Sangbai's department and with our friends, Representative Tesser at the General Assembly, to ensure that veterans are not left behind when it comes to the state's mental health initiatives. Together, we are aligning resources to ensure veterans have access to the comprehensive mental health services designed specifically for them. I've also had the privilege of visiting the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Clinic in Jacksonville multiple times. This clinic is a lifeline for active duty service members, veterans, and their families, and they offer high-quality, culturally competent care at little to no cost. And just last week, I was with Dr. Kane at UNC Thrive, and I had the honor of speaking at their bridging ceremony. Programs like UNC's Thrive initiative are changing the narrative by integrating clinical care with reintegration support specifically for veterans with TBIs and PTSD, helping veterans not just survive, but thrive. But here's the truth. No single program or agency can meet the complex needs alone of military and veteran families. And that's why my number one priority as a secretary is sector collaboration. Because we need government to align policy, and we need businesses to open their doors, and we need universities to share their insights, and nonprofits to deliver services. And that's the only way that we're going to create the stronger system that our military and veteran families need. And when we do that, it's not just an investment in individuals. It's an investment in the strength and resilience of our state and in the North Carolinians who have sacrificed so much for our freedom and safety. Our veterans have stood for us in our most vulnerable moments, and it is our responsibility to stand for them now. And together, I believe that we can ensure that those who have given so much to our nation and state have the care and support they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Millett. Our next presenter is Dr. Sean Kane, a retired U.S. Army physician who served with the U.S. Army Special Operations Command Airborne. Dr. Kane now serves as both the Chief Medical Officer and Primary Care Physician for the UNC Thrive program, where he brings his deep experience in military medicine to support veterans and their families through trauma-informed integrated care. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kane.
Thank you very much, Senator Batch, and thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to stand up here in front of you and represent the Matthew Gefeller Center and the Thrive program over at UNC. So this is our mission that we have, right? We serve veterans and first responders who have a history of traumatic brain injury and PTSD, and our goal is to do this through the combination of clinical practice, research, and education. And we've been up and running now for about 3.5 to 4 years, and it's a fantastic program, which I'm very honored and proud to share with you. So our Thrive program is a primarily philanthropically funded program that encompasses two main pillars, or three main pillars actually. The first one is a comprehensive 3-day evaluation that we bring veterans and first responders in. They come in, we cover their travel, we cover their food, and from an insurance standpoint, we get what we get. We're happy to get, as much as we get. Interesting part from a veteran standpoint is we will also see veterans regardless of their discharge status. So even if they're not eligible for care at the VA, we will still see them. After that, there's a second phase, or a 3-week intensive treatment program, and then there's discharge planning and a minimum of a year of follow-up. In that first interdisciplinary evaluation, the 2.5 or 3 days, they're going to see all the people listed on this slide. So they're going to have, in all honesty, months worth of appointments done in a 2.5 to 3 day period. So it's a busy 3 days, but it's incredibly rewarding and beneficial. At the end of that 3-day program, we either let them know, hey, you're doing great, there's nothing wrong with you, you're awesome, good luck, and we're still there for you. The other thing is maybe they have some targeted interventions that we want them to follow up with when they go home. So we send them home with a pretty thorough discharge packet to bring back to their primary care provider with listed recommendations they can do. Then the third outcome is, hey, you're doing well. We would like you to do some of these things in your community, but we'd also like you to come back to our 3-week treatment program. And again, that 3 weeks is focused primarily on treatment, and it includes kind of conventional and regular healthcare, activities, plus some more, non-traditional things. We do equine therapy, we do art therapy, there's yoga, there's acupuncture and things like that. So it's very holistic, encompasses the whole spectrum of healthcare. At the end of that 3 weeks, we have the bridging ceremony that the secretary said she just attended last week, which was awesome for us. In that, we call it a bridging ceremony, not a graduation, because that's the bridge to the next phase of their life. Graduation implies an end. This is not the end. This is a bridge, a beginning to the new phase of their life, with that discharge planning and a minimum of a year of follow-up. Currently, we've obviously been in business for longer than a year, and we continue to follow up with those other people. That first year, we follow them very closely with kind of repeated surveys and screening tools just to see how they're doing. So the first year is, I would say, more intensive directed follow-up, but any member of our program, any participant of our program is always free to reach out to our staff, our awesome social workers, and continue that follow-up. Overall, we've seen about 380 plus participants. You can see on our slide up there, obviously North Carolina is the greatest number. You can see North Carolina, or Virginia, South Carolina, and all the way out west to Boise, Idaho. You can see the makeup of the branches that we've seen, and this graph right here represents primarily our veteran population. We've also now expanded it to see active duty service members who are in the process of transitioning, and the distribution on that pie chart for our active duty population is approximately the same. In the state of North Carolina, this is the plot of who we've seen in our state. Again, of those 380 plus, 244 plus have been from the state of North Carolina, covering 81 different cities and towns and communities. So as I stated at the start, we are philanthropically funded, and that allows us to reduce the barriers of care. That philanthropic funds, obviously, as I believe one of the senators on the early panel said, money is finite. And we are budgeting and spending that money wisely. For the 3-day evaluation, it costs approximately $6,200 per participant. That does not just include their health care, that includes travel, lodging, food, and stuff like that. For that 3-week program, as you can see there, it costs approximately $31,000 per participant. Mention that we charge insurance. So from a federal payer standpoint, we get about 22% of that back. From a commercial payer standpoint, we get about 35% of that back. The participants who have just VA healthcare insurance, it's probably lower than the federal return rate also. So what can we do? What do we need? We will be the first to admit that the more money we get, the longer we can keep this program going. So people who are in the healthcare insurance industry and who are responsible for that, I would ask you to consider models like this that don't necessarily fit in the traditional healthcare model and work on encouraging reimbursement. From a state legislator, state representative standpoint, I mean, this program is housed at the flagship university in the state. Sorry, Duke fans. And it serves our entire state as evidenced by our data. And you know what? If you feel free, if you know colleagues in those other states that are represented up there, if they send us some money too, we'll be very happy to increase our care for them. So that's Thrive. It's our privilege to do this. This is a picture of the team from the Matthew Gefeller Center, as well as the Thrive program, which is housed in there. Again, this is a very unique organization at the university. We're supported by the entire university, the School of Medicine, the healthcare system, the physicians group, and the academic side. So that is it, and thank you very much for the time. It's been a privilege.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kane, for your presentation. Our third presenter is the lived experience speaker for this pillar, and that's Ben Ingram. And apparently I call him Mr. Ingram and put respect on his name because he said that's his dad. So Ben is a U.S. Navy veteran who served as a hospital corpsman with the Marine Corps Battalion based out of Camp Lejeune. During his service, he faced sustained high-stress environments, traumatic exposure, and injury. Today, he continues to serve others as a licensed clinical social worker, providing care and support to veterans, first responders, and individuals impacted by trauma and addiction. Please join me in welcoming Ben.
I am quite tall, sorry. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I just want to take the time to thank my wife who's in the audience, my father, my family, and my friends. Their steady presence during and after my military service has been a constant, and without them, I probably would not be here. My name is Ben Ingram. I'm a Navy veteran. I served as a corpsman, which is a medic, for those of you who don't know, with the United States Marine Corps, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines down at Camp Lejeune. As a corpsman, I was responsible for caring for those Marines, often on their worst days of their life. I treated injuries that never made the news. I watched young men carry wounds, some visible, some deeply hidden, and I watched many of them push through pain because stopping felt more dangerous than continuing. To my Marines, the ones I lost and the ones I kept on this earth, you mean everything to me, and you still do it more than a decade later. I learned very early how quickly someone can move from capable and confident to overwhelmed and vulnerable, and how sacred the trust is when another human being places their life in your hands. That experience taught me responsibility, vigilance, and how much suffering can quietly exist beneath a calm, composed exterior. I'm not here as a statistic or as a neatly packaged success story. I'm here as someone who continues to live with the effects of service and who has learned that healing is not about erasing the past, but about how to learn how to carry it responsibly. When I transitioned out of the military, I didn't fall apart in visible ways. I was functional. I worked. I showed up. I met expectations. From the outside, my life appeared stable and intact. Unfortunately, inside, I was not. I lived nightmares, constant vigilance. I lived with fatigue that rest never touched. There were long stretches that I didn't want my life to end. I just wanted the noise in my mind to be quiet. I remember sitting in intake appointments at the VA where I was asked a series of check boxes: sleep, work, safety. And because I was employed and not actively suicidal, I was told to wait. I was referred out. I was scheduled weeks or months down the road. I was offered short-term management for long-term trauma. At the time, the message, unspoken but clear, was that I was quite not bad enough off just yet. I was routed through systems that addressed pieces of the problem, but never the whole. Nightmares are treated without trauma. Anxieties were treated without context. Appointments were brief, disconnected, and rarely followed by continuity. On paper, I was in care, but in reality, I was alone. For this period of my life, I was also living with addiction, not out of recklessness, but out of survival. For many veterans like myself, unhealthy coping strategies are not a disregard of life. They're about finding a way to endure when meaningful support feels out of reach. I currently live with PTSD and a traumatic brain injury, both related to service. Those experiences didn't end when my service ended. They still shape how I sleep, how I handle stress, how I work, how my brain processes things, properly and improperly. But they don't define who I am. What changed my life wasn't a single policy, it wasn't a perfect program, or a moment of clarity, it was people. It was clinicians who slowed down and listened. It was my family and friends who stayed when I pulled away. It was being treated as a human being, not as a problem to manage. Today, I work as a therapist with veterans, first responders, and others who carry trauma quietly. Working with these communities remind me daily that healing isn't about perfection. It's about presence, consistency, and trust building over time. And that's why I'm speaking with you here today. I recognize that decisions you face are not simple ones. You're weighing education, infrastructure, public safety, health access, economic growth, and many other real and worthy demands for our limited resources. And I'm not here to suggest that mental health exists in isolation of those priorities. I'm here to suggest that it's deeply connected to all of those. When mental health care is delayed, fragmented, or treated as optional, the costs don't disappear, they simply shift elsewhere. They show up in our emergency rooms. They show up in law enforcement encounters. They show up in disability claims, in workforce attrition, and in families quietly coming apart at the seams. The most expensive care is not often the care itself, it's but timely, effective care. So I'll just make one or two suggestions for the policymakers in the room, as I am not one of them. We need to protect and fund long-term, relationship-based mental health care for vets. Care measured not simply by how many people move through the system, but by whether the system actually helps stabilize, function, and remain connected in their lives. Continuity matters. Outcomes matter. Healing cannot be reduced to session limits, productivity quotas, and crisis thresholds. It also means reducing barriers that delay care until someone's ready in crisis. Veterans should not have to deteriorate to qualify for help. Early intervention is not humane. It's efficient. As you evaluate systems and outcomes, I would encourage you to look at some of these metrics. How long does it take a veteran to access care? Are people able to stay engaged in treatment over time? Are repeat crisis visits decreasing? Are veterans able to remain employed, housed, and connected to their families? Veterans don't heal on a stopwatch. Recovery does not follow a fiscal calendar. You have the ability to shape systems that meet veterans before they break, systems that treat long-term human beings, not as short-term problems. Systems that recognize that survival strategies can grow into healthy, meaningful lives when support is steady. I'm not standing here today because someone believed I was worth sustained care, because I was worth sustained care, not just crisis management. So thank you for listening. Thank you for the work all of you do, both here and in the other room. And thank you for remembering that behind every policy decision is a real person like me, quietly hoping to be supported and met before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. And I also just want to take a moment for all of us to recognize and thank our panelists who have served our country and through their military service, and also Representative Sheetzel and anyone else who is a veteran in the audience. Thank you for everything that you've done to keep our country safe and protecting us. So thank you for your service. Now we'll move over into our second panel discussion for questions and answers. I have the honor of having my wonderful Senate colleagues joining on this panel. That would be Senator Jim Bergen, Senator Lisa Grafstein, and they are joined by Representative Renee Price and Representative Mike Sheetzel. Rose, if I come up on this stage, that means the time's up.
Okay. I missed you last time.
I know. Without further ado, I turn it back over to Ms. Hogan. Thank you.
Well, we've actually made up a little bit of time, so we can stretch out, relax, and but in truth, to jump right in, I was thinking, listening to Ben, and quickly writing. You talked about ensuring the continuity of programs, right? Like so that you have long-term follow-up. Programs that made a difference. We just heard about the Thrive program, and I'm sure I'm lowballing it, but I did a back of the envelope, like 14 million. Sounds like, kind of what you're needing. First off, what other initiatives and resources at the state level are there that support grassroots efforts to support veterans' mental health that we don't know about? Like, warning, these could become stories. I mean, we'll be talking to you, Doctor, about Thrive. But what are other things that are out there that folks need to know more about, that folks that need more support? Do we know? Are there any? I know you always have something to say, Senator Bergen.
Thank you, Rose, and I want to thank Max and everybody, and to thank the Secretary. She and I have got to be good friends, and I appreciate what she's doing. And I do want to recognize a Senate colleague of mine, Senator Dana Jones. Dana, stand up and just wave. And you all need to get to know her. She's got a passion. She's got a passion for mental health also. So be sure and reach out to her. And I've been texting with Cody, and he said to tell you all hi. He was, we were texting about some things earlier, but he wants me to call him when I leave, and I told him I would. But he said hello. A lot of things, Rose. In the last budget that we did $835 million towards mental health, and that money is getting out and going places, and we're working on a lot of initiatives. But we've got to rethink, and the Secretary and I have had these conversations, and I've had these conversations in Washington. We've not been doing our veterans justice. We train them to do all these things, send them all over the world, and then we bring them back and we put them back in their families without doing the training to help them function again the way that they need to do. I'll tell a real quick story because stories are memorable, but I have a good friend that lives in our community. He called me one day, and he and his wife were going through a separation, probably divorce. They had young children, and he was having thoughts of suicide. He called the VA and called down at Fort Bragg. They told him it'd be 4 months before they could see him. Oof. Now, folks, if you're having suicidal thoughts, now we got him into a Christian counselor. God works in wonderful ways. The family got back together. They've had another child since then. His businesses are doing great. I talked to him last week. But that's what's wrong with the system. When somebody needs help, somebody needs to come, and it doesn't just need to be Ghostbusters or somebody. It needs to be somebody that actually comes and does something. And we haven't done the veterans right about that. I had a brother-in-law that was a Vietnam vet, and very similar thing. He had been on medications. He didn't like the way they made him feel, and it was one of those, I don't like the way they make me feel, or I'm not myself when I'm taking them, and all that. And my sister and niece had to move out, and anyway. But he sat down and put a gun in his mouth and killed himself in the kitchen. Those things shouldn't be happening, but they're still happening at about the same number. I track how many a day veterans die, and it's about the same number that it's been being. So what we're doing is not working. So one of the things I would propose is we give veteran services wherever they are, and we treat them the same wherever they are. If they go to VA, if they go to any hospital or anything, there should be no difference in services. They should be able to get services as good or even better than any of us could walk in any place and get. So one of our goals is all of these facilities. There's going to be a new mental health facility in Garner that Wake Med is doing. There's new facilities going at ECU. There's new facilities. We're working with a bunch of different hospitals trying to roll out mental health services and to have centers where we don't want veterans or anybody, their first entry into a mental health situation being with the police and or through the emergency room, because that's how most people are getting into help right now. And I don't know if Dr. Brown is still here, but right there. She's the first person I call. I've talked to her last week about, I tell everybody she's my psychiatrist, and so, and we talk regularly about cases, and she will always help. And Carrie, I so appreciate you and everything you do.
So, Rose, as you ask about what can the state do and what's happening at the state level, first, let me just again thank the members of the General Assembly who are here. Like Senator Batch said, the ones who are here, not that there are ones who don't care, who are not here, but the ones who are here really do truly care, and I'm so grateful to see so many of you here. So I'm not talking about y'all with this next story. Okay, so I do really love telling this story, but when Governor Stein first became the governor last January, he gave every cabinet secretary 15 minutes to deep dive our respective cabinet agencies. And when it was my turn, the trial attorney and me wanted to start with an attention-grabbing statement, and so I did. And I said, "Good afternoon, Governor and fellow cabinet secretaries. I would like all of you to stop saying North Carolina is the #1 state for military and veterans, because we're not. And when you say that, it makes you look like you're out of touch and that you don't know what's going on in your state." And after I know, my other secretaries were like, "Jocelyn, that was your outside voice. Why did you say that out loud?" And had that rumbling, yeah. But it's true, and that's why I said it. And to that, the governor said, "Well, Secretary Millett, what are other states doing that we're not?" And I said, "Governor, respectfully, you've given me 15 minutes. And if I were to tell you everything other states are doing that we are not yet doing in North Carolina, it would take all of that time and then some." So I gave him two. I gave him property taxes and spousal licensure requirements. And we've talked about the others since. But I love that story for two reasons. And one is that was his immediate reaction. Again, he is so competitive in a great way for our state. He wanted to immediately know what other states are doing that we are not yet doing, that we can do to improve the lives of military and veterans in North Carolina. And the second reason why I love this story is because he actually has stopped saying we're the #1 state for military and veterans. He says we're a great state for military and veterans, and we are, but we are not #1. And we don't get to be #1 because of the sheer statistics, because we have the 4th largest military population and the 8th largest veteran population, and 20,000 transitioning service members just from our bases every year, if I have the smallest cabinet agency in the entire cabinet. There are 4 divisions within the Department of Environmental Quality that have more people and more money than my entire department. Every single division in the North Carolina Department of Transportation has more people and more money than my entire department. I have an outreach and transition support division that is staffed by 1 person. And to Dr. Brown's point earlier about receiving money and having a vision for that money, I have a vision, North Carolina General Assembly. Many of them have heard it. I'm happy to meet with any of you one-on-one. But the vision would be that I would have a full-time employee at each of the major military installations. And so we have made a budget request to the General Assembly, right, Chief of Staff? My Chief of Staff is here, y'all, Jessica Slider-Woodchard. I'm not gonna have my staff stand up because there's one here, Jess. But my plan would be to have 4 FTEs is what we've requested, and to have one of them at each of the bases, so we can be that warm handoff for transitioning military families. Because the transition assistance program that they put us through as veterans transitioning out, it's such a fire hose effect of information. It's such a blur, and we need to make sure that we're meeting and having an individualized approach to transition, so we're not failing our nation and our state's heroes. And so our goal is that we would have individual appointments with one of my 60 veteran service officers or one of the 200 county veteran service officers throughout the state, so we can have that individualized approach to transition. So what did you say, Senator Batch, about all of our problems related to money? Okay, that's my answer to that question.
Well, thank you for that. Wow, that's... Sounds like you have support for your asks. Are there other Representative Price? I think we got you.
Can you hear me? Yes, because I can hear me. Yes, first of all, I do want to thank the committee for putting me on this panel. And to all the veterans that are here, I am not a military veteran, but my father served in World War II, and my great-great-grandfather served in the Civil War. So I am deeply concerned about veterans and how we treat veterans when they return home. And one thing that I do want to add to what already has been said is that we do need to decentralize the services that are provided. I had friends years ago, they'd have to go from Durham, or they couldn't get an appointment at Durham, so he went all the way to Winston-Salem in order to get services and then waited all day. And I think that if we have more facilities at home, make them more accessible, that would help. And I do need to give a shout out to, I see two members of the Orange County Board of County Commissioners, and I want to thank them we had a long discussion on, even when I was a commissioner, on having a behavioral and mental health facility in Orange County. And they are now bringing that to pass, so I want to thank at least the two of them that are sitting out there. But we have to make these services accessible. If you have to wait all day and all night, and people walk away. They just go back home. I had a very dear friend years ago. He's now passed away, but he was a Vietnam veteran. And he had a panic attack. He could not leave his house. Now, this was a Marine. He was over 6 feet big. I mean, he might scare you. But he was afraid to step outside the house. And so if we have facilities, well, number one, if we continue to break down that stigma about mental health, then we can have more open conversations and people may feel more at ease about, oh, I need to go see, a therapist or a doctor or get into a program, and just talk about it and make the programs more accessible.
It looked like, yeah.
If I just really quickly can add on to that. So I am a military veteran, but I'll be completely honest with you. My job was to play a bugle in Washington, D.C. for 4 years, so I didn't have quite the same experience that many of my other family members did. My father was a Marine Corps combat veteran. His brother, my uncle, was an Army medic. And my grandfather was a World War II Army veteran. One of his cousins is buried in Europe. He was killed just a few weeks before VE Day during World War II. So my family has a lot of experience with this. I like to talk about my father's experience in particular because when he came back from Vietnam, and when he came back, he transitioned out of the Marine Corps in 1976 and spent several years with a young family. At the time, he had a wife and a daughter, my older sister. And they later had another son, and he tried to make things work in San Diego, and they just couldn't do it. He could not find acceptance in the community being out of the military, and he could not find that community. I should probably back up. There's a little bit more you need to know about my dad. See, his mother had left when he was 9 years old, and his father had passed away when he was 10. He was an orphan. And the Marine Corps was his family. That was his whole identity, his reason for existence, was to be a warrior. And to come back and not be able to accompany his wife to her work events because a car backfiring could set him off, created distance between him and the people around him. So they moved. They moved outside of Denver, Colorado, in a town called Black Hawk that had 232 people in the 1980 census. His family was 4 of them. By then, my older brother had been born. He got around on horseback. He didn't want to be connected to the community because the community didn't necessarily want to be connected to him. But I think that's the challenge that we have for a lot of our military veterans when they get out. You are plucking them out of organizations where many of them have found identity. Many of them come from backgrounds that may have been a lot more difficult than people realize. People who come from trauma, childhood trauma, people that come from broken families and who are trying to find a new way, a better way of existence. And the military gives them that structure, the military gives them that identity, and then you pull them back out of that and put them back in civilian life. And what they get is a cold referral from one service to the next service, as opposed to the person there who's trying to hold their hand and walk them to, you've got this appointment, you got to go to dental tomorrow, you've got all these things going on. It's very difficult to recreate that culture. And so I'd like to shout out two organizations that I know of. I represent Northern Wake County. And there's one organization, the Veterans Life Center in Granville County, that does tremendous work helping veterans, particularly that are suffering with substance abuse issues, and trying to get them back on their feet, creating a community of veterans there who are all trying to overcome similar problems, many of them. I'd also like to shout out the Joel Fund in Rollsville, which does a great job building community around art therapy and trying to ensure that veterans find other ways to express themselves and express the things that they're feeling. There are great organizations to the extent that we can. Yes, the state needs to find ways to fund them. Spoiler alert, I'm in my second year, my first term in the General Assembly. I don't have a seat at the table either. Where's Alan? But these are important things that we need to be talking about and making sure are on people's radar, because it's critically important that we support these initiatives and these centers.
Thanks for that's great to hear. I once had a therapist tell me that art is the only real true therapy, right? And it needs to be lifted up as such. What ways does the Military and Veterans Support Act of 2025 improve mental health access or care coordination? Do we know? Do we have a sense of that?
I did look at it again, and now it's all gone out of my head. A lot of it, so there are a lot of things about connecting people to services. A bulk of it, the amended version, I think that came back from the House this way, really was addressing some of the issues around veterans being exploited in terms of applying for benefits, and there were organizations out there that were charging them exorbitant sums to apply for benefits that they could have access to for free. So the big piece of it was cracking down on that sort of thing, and then just other kind of pieces of connection to services. So it was really, to me, more about those sorts of handoffs that are not just here's a list of things you can get, but like ways to connect people to services. So, but I really should have led off Rose by saying I can't believe nobody has brought this up yet, but go PAC. So I just want to shout out Wake County.
Okay,
thank you, Mike.
We App State in the House. Wait, that's the other.
App State, anyone? Anyway, So that's as I understand it, what it does, and I think part of what I've heard a lot of really is about sort of the silo aspect of our systems in general around mental health, certainly around veteran services, that we don't have these connections that are made. And I think some of it goes back to your question to the last panel, because it's the reality of being on a panel is you always want the question from the last panel. So your question to the last panel, kind of about how do we show that these services work, how do we show that this new program is working so that the funding will become recurring funding instead of one-time funding? Because, I think Dr. Brown mentioned the $800-something million that we've been hearing about for several years, but that's one-time money, so it's getting put into these little pots here and there. I would not be a Democrat if I didn't bring up the opportunity scholarships and the $600+ million that are going into that for a year with no evidence that that's actually beneficial to our education system as a whole. I say that not to trash one thing or another, one program versus another, but to say a lot of times people come, to these kinds of things when we're talking about things like mental health, when we're talking about services for people with developmental disabilities or TBI or substance use, and there's all this attention to, well, here's a little bit of money, but you have to prove that you're going to, solve world peace before you're going to get another dime. But we spend a lot of money kind of on gut level or kind of on policy things that are about kind of real more political priorities than these kinds of things. There's so much work done around evidence-based supports for people. It was great. I mean, 13 sounds great. 13 evidence-based treatment plans. These things are real, and we've been doing the research on them for years, and we should trust the research now and make sure that people have the resources to implement the things that we know that work. One thing we know that works, you ready for this? You're not going to believe it. Paying people to do jobs so that they will do the jobs. You heard it here, not first. So all of that is to say, I think it's important that we have specialized programs for people. I do think it matters that particularly veterans who need to know that they have veterans that they can go to, or people who understand veterans issues. I had a half-brother who served in the Vietnam era in the Marines, and he was changed and died young. And honestly, because I think he had a lot of untreated conditions that now we know and recognize and have programs for. I think it is important that we have things specific for people that are, that reach them where they are. But we know what those things are, and I think we have to allocate the money as the legislature. And this goes into a separation of powers issue, my other pet peeve. We have to allocate the money and then let that money be administered by the body that spends that money, and require accountability, absolutely. But I'm somebody who doesn't think that I need to know the precise metrics for that $80 million, because $80 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but in the grand scheme of the DHHS budget, certainly the grand scheme of our budget, we have to be able to trust kind of the keepers along the way that they're doing their jobs. We hold them accountable, but I don't think we ought to be managing at the dollar level. Just my 2 cents.
So, Rose, I'll add that the Military and Veteran Support Act of 2025, I think, is an acknowledgement that when you increase access to care and you increase benefits for veterans broadly, even outside of health care, it strengthens outcomes overall. And so 2 of the ways that specific act does that is it prohibits discrimination of veterans when they apply for higher educational opportunities. That you cannot deny someone admission into a school because they have indicated on their application that they're a veteran or a military in the military, or if it's a military spouse. And they also allow for deferment now because of this act for up to 2 years because of military service. But it also allows parents who have kids and are still in the military, it allows them to register their kids for school up to a year before they actually move. And so you can anticipate and say, this is where we want to live and move, so we're able to register our kids for school in this specific district, even though you may not have a home in that district yet. And that actually, it's so good for so many reasons. My siblings and I moved 8 times from K through 12, and sometimes some families move twice in one move because they first have to register for school based on their temporary housing while they're waiting to find their permanent home, and then they register for a different school because they found their permanent home. But now, thanks to the Military and Veteran Support Act of last year, they don't have to do that. They can register based on their anticipated school district. So that's really great. But I'm also proud, my department operates 4 state veterans homes that are open right now, and we have a requirement from the VA to have a licensed clinical social worker at every single home. So Ben, if you want to be one of our LCSWs, talk to me afterwards. But I also just want to highlight, I'm biased to the Durham VA Medical Center. It is where I received my care at the Garner VA Clinic that you recently mentioned. So I do want to highlight 2 things that are happening that are really great. And one of them, yes, money is an issue, but it's not going to stop me, or I think any of us who are here, from doing the things that we need to do to support and serve our military and veteran families. And so part of the solution, while we're waiting on money, is to collaborate and be innovative. And I want to highlight what they're doing in Havelock. Havelock, they've partnered with the Craven County Health Department and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they have opened up a medical or a mental health clinic in the city. So the VA is working at a county-owned building to see people for mental health appointments, and they can see up to 2,500 appointments per year. There's also the veteranscrisisline.net website. You can input your city and state and zip code, and it tells you where resources are, and you can change the radius based on where you live. And I tried it last night, and it works, and it's accurate. But also the Garner VA Clinic has 3 what they call behavioral health interdisciplinary program teams, 3 of them, and they provide personalized mental health care from people from all disciplines. So these teams are comprised of nurses and doctors, but also care coordinators, therapists, and peer support specialists. So there are great programs that are happening on the state level and also with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Wow, that's really encouraging. I'm excited to hear that.
It's not all bad. It's not all bad.
Let's talk about justice-involved veterans a little bit. I know that there's been some funding from the legislature for veterans courts. Is there adequate policy support and funding for that effort, and what more can be done?
First Veterans Court in North Carolina started in our county, in Harnett County. I was commissioner at the time, and part of Fort Bragg, and a lot of the military that don't live on base live in Harnett County. And so we were talking, a group of us, about how many veterans we were having involved and some of the outcomes that weren't good. So it started there, and the governor came down, Pat McCrory came down, and we had a big kickoff, and it's going well. And so we will see anybody from any of the surrounding counties too, and there's a number of them that have been started, and they're very successful. And I've been talking to Judge Newby about all kinds of specialty courts. One of the best things we can do for health care and mental health care is to intervene as early as possible. You all know that. I've been coming to this meeting since I won my first election, and thank you all for showing up on a Saturday in February and visiting, and it's great to see so many friendly faces, and I appreciate your all's passion for this, but that is a good example of how you keep people out of the judicial system, because we've got success stories of reuniting families, getting children back with families, keeping people from being homeless, and I try to go to their graduations when I'm in town or when they're going to have a big graduation, and just listening to those stories is phenomenal. So I don't think we necessarily need a veterans court in every county, but we ought to have enough available so people can participate anywhere in the state that they are.
Okay, thank you very much. So this is a question from one of the registrants, and I've been noodling with this question for a while because it's got me concerned. This questioner is concerned with access to care for people experiencing homelessness who intersect with the criminal justice system. And I know that there's a large number of those folks who come from the veterans community. After the unfortunate incident, a couple unfortunate incidents we've had now in the state, there's been some, we've come really far on destigmatizing mental health disabilities. But I'm starting to hear people say things like, including lawmakers, say things like, well, there are people who just need to be locked up. There are people who just need to be put away. And now we have 8 states suing to make it easier to segregate people with disabilities. So what is North Carolina, or what are state lawmakers willing to do to protect the human rights of people who are in mental health treatment? I know you've got thoughts about this, Senator Grafstein.
I know. I was trying to pause for a moment to see if anybody wanted to jump in. And the specific question was, what are we willing to do to protect the human rights of people with disabilities? I think part of it is talking about it differently. It's so easy to just marginalize people by saying they're different than me. And I'm listening to this book that's really interesting called Everything is Tuberculosis. Yes, but it talks about the stigma associated with tuberculosis when it was during the pre-sort of industrial era. I have a point, I promise. During the pre-industrial era.
I've read the book. I know where you're going.
Yeah. Okay. You were seen as sort of somebody of sort of heightened sensitivity, and like it was a lofty thing almost to have tuberculosis because it seemed to happen, when people would become poets and Keats and people like that. And so it was this lovely thing. And with industrialization, tuberculosis, of course, passes from people. It's a communicable disease. So it ended up being a disease of lower wealth people, poor people, people who were working in those industries. It became a much more of associated anyway with people of African American descent because of the conditions in which they were living, and changed very much into a stigmatized as opposed to a lofty disease. And part of it really is just about how we are thinking about our fellow humans. And I think part of what is a problem is we think of people as being good or being bad. And we've all got a little bad in us, right, Senator Batch? We've all got a little bad in us. And we all, you've never walked in somebody else's shoes, right? So you don't know kind of how they got to where they are. People who commit these crimes that, it's been more than twice, Rose, but we see them on video now, or we see things that we didn't used to see. And what we see are people who have been through things and who have been traumatized and who have been engaged in drug activities, perhaps because of things that happened in their youth. One of the things that that really struck me about the governor's executive order was he goes through, I think it's 6 or 7 pages of, whereases, and I'm a lawyer, I love the whereas part, right? The whereases are just data point after data point after data point about how badly we're doing. And, Governor Stein's not trying to, beat up on the mental health community. What he's trying to lay out really is that with something like 97% of youth in juvenile detention, 97 have a mental health diagnosis. 97% have a mental health diagnosis. Some other huge percent have drug addiction issues, right? And that's because of lack of prevention, because they've come up in situations where that's where their life led, right? And I told the folks around me after Dakota spoke, we should just get up and leave, because honestly, she laid the whole thing out, right? It's all in there, right? It's what happens to you. It's not because somebody was born bad. It's because of what happens to you. So I think it's really hard to be compassionate when you've seen a video of somebody committing a murder, right? It's very difficult to be compassionate, and we don't have to be compassionate and try to make excuses or anything like that, but we do have to understand how we got there, how this situation happened the way it happened, and not excuse bad behavior, not say somebody shouldn't be punished, but to say, we can't separate ourselves from what happened over there because it's got nothing to do with us, because it does have something to do with us. And that goes back to the tuberculosis thing. It's all about distancing. You want to say this happens to those people over there, or it's caused by those people over there, because that's not me and it won't affect my life. And the reality is it's all around us, and it's just your circumstance as to where you ended up. So that's my long explanation of the tuberculosis book.
Well, it resonates for me. Early in my nursing career, I worked in an inpatient facility for women who were substance using and their infant children. We had 36 women in the house. And every single one of those women had been molested as children. Every single one. And, and then their drug use came directly out of their way, they're attempting to cope. So, yeah. Well, let's go to the Senate side, and then we'll come back to you, Representative Price.
Who?
Senator Bergen.
I was just going to say, if you look at all these recent cases of people that had been in the justice system, a number of times, 32 arrests, multiple. If you go back and really look at the cases, the reason they were let out, they were put on medication and they were functioning and they were put out. And I'm a big proponent of long-term injectables, and I think we're going to have to do a better job of monitoring people and people that are released, making sure that they're on their long-term injectables and all that. And just as a side note, for the last year and a half, I've been going out and visiting on death row, and now they'll let me go in and interview death row inmates. And so, and I don't talk about their cases. I always have their attorney with me, but I talk about their early life. And let me tell you the common 3 things that I've found from the ones I've interviewed so far. None of them had a biological father in their family. All of them have limited education. All of them started on marijuana when they were 12, 13, or 14 years old. Now, when your earliest memory is being in bed and your mother's being raped beside you, what's that going to do to you? And so that's what we've got to get a handle on, folks, is early childhood. And one of the bills I'm really proud of, and it didn't get a lot of, is allowing the master level clinical psychologist to work up to the scope of their practice. And scope is another thing we need to revisit, and we need to let healthcare providers work at their scope. And another thing I want to say while I've got the microphone, I think that people that are here that are not legal, if they will agree to become a nurse or a doctor or a PA or something, we ought to give them that education and make them a legal citizen the day they take that job.
I had a scope question that I wasn't able to get to. But Representative Price, I'm sorry that.
Yes, I kind of lost what the question was, but I do have some responses.
It's how do we ensure the human rights for folks who are
human rights. Well, that basically has been my life, is trying to make sure that everyone has their, is respected and has their basic human rights. And one of the things that kind of bothers me is we use this term disabilities, and we all have varying abilities, as opposed to, I think that's for me, that's one issue that we talk about someone's disabilities, and they may be very good in doing something else, something that I can't do, but we start segregating people into these, different classes. And then you mentioned veterans becoming homeless and one, we're all one step away, really, in many cases, from being homeless, not having a job, being separated from our families. Who knows? I'm just, a couple votes away from not being probably, an elected official. You never know. But one of the programs that we started in Orange County and also in other counties across North Carolina and the nation, because I was part of the National Association of Counties, was the Stepping Up Initiative. And that was to try to get people before they're arrested, to have that intervention, and so that they immediately get treatment. And if we understand, if we have that kind of compassion for people, rather than, oh, she's up there, I got to keep it short. Yeah, if we have that compassion for people, I think that would broaden, you said the word scope, broaden our scope and what we can do for other people, and for our friends and neighbors and family members, when we understand that mental illness does affect all of us in some way, shape, or form at some time in our lives. And then look for treatment. And I just want to mention one program that I had the opportunity to visit. It's the HBOT for Heroes, which is hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And they're now trying to operate on just what they have left in their treasury. So if we can get a budget and get a line item for them, there will be more assistance for our veterans.
So I just, moment of personal privilege.
Of course.
So it's been a long time I've been doing this, and it needs to get said for everyone in the room. The lawmakers who come up here and sit on the stage, we really need to give them a round of applause, because Democrat, Republican, we hold your feet to the fire, it really is appreciated by everyone in this room. So thank you so much. And that was
Thank you. Thank you so very much. To Rose, and for all of you, if you don't know Rose, but if you've been coming to this for a while, you certainly do. Please follow her. You see that she doesn't pull punches. Sometimes it feels like when she asks you a question, she's punching you in the face. But that's her job, and we get really important answers from her. So thank you, Rose, for doing that. Thank you to the panelists and my fellow electeds for being here, and of course talking about this important issue. You are free to leave the stage while I make closing remarks. And please thank them while they are walking off. It's interesting. People always are like, you talk about therapy a lot. And I was like, yeah. I do. It's important. You should all thank me for being in therapy. But the reason why I say that, outside of the fact that it's true, is that I remember a moment several years ago when actually Senator Bergen and I were at a town hall in Wake County, and we were talking about mental health, mental illness, access to mental health services, et cetera. And I talked about me in therapy. And after that, I had no less than 5 kids come up to me and say, thank you for actually talking about therapy and the fact that you're going, because you're someone who I see who is successful, and that whatever you go to therapy for has not held you back, but has allowed for you to be successful. And so what I say, thank you. And so I say it because you don't ever know the impact that you have on someone in a room when you're talking about what your experience is. So for those who are comfortable and brave enough to talk about your mental health, to talk about what you do, please do so, because there are so many individuals that are touched by it that you will never know that you will save their lives. And it's really important, especially here today, and what people are facing, because life is hard, and it is harder now than ever to live in this world, that we are actually reaching out to individuals. And so to the providers, to the people with lived experience, to the legislators, to the policymakers, and to all that care about mental health and the well-being of North Carolinians, I thank you for being here this morning and for spending your morning and early afternoon with us. Let's not let the momentum of this moment stop here. We have a lot of challenges, but we have brilliant people in this state who deeply care, and they have solutions. And so as we move forward, please mark your calendars for February of next year, where we will continue to repeat this process. And I also want to say to my Republican colleagues who are here, from the bottom of my heart, we thank you. Because as of right now, you hold the purse strings. And unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges that we have in this world. And you have chosen to come here today, partner with us, and speak honestly about all of the challenges and what you care about. We live in really partisan times, y'all. But at the end of the day, the only way that we're going to move this state forward is by actually working together. And the legislators here today want that for our state. And so thank you again for spending your day with us. Try not to freeze. It's actually cold in here too. But try not to freeze as you walk to your cars. Safe travels, and we will see you next year.